I'd like to thank everybody for coming out to tonight's joint Town Council and School Committee meeting. It is February 17, 2015 at 7:30 p.m. here in Council Chambers, and we will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Councilor Carrasco?
Present.
Councilor Clements?
Present.
Councilor Estrada?
Present.
Councilor Manna?
Excused.
Councilor Moriarty?
Present.
Councilor Peliquin?
Present.
Councilor Steves?
Present.
Councilor Vandal?
Present.
Councilor Vecchia?
Present.
8 present, 1 excused. Mr. Abrahamson?
Present.
Mrs. Congdon?
Present.
Mrs. Donovan?
Present.
Mrs. McLaughlin?
Present.
Mr. Olivo?
Mr. Levo is excused. He was called to snow removal active duty tonight.
Dr. Page?
Present.
Mrs. Quinney?
Present.
6 present, 1 excused.
Thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 3, consider and accept the joint council/school committee minutes of Thursday, January 29, 2015.
So move.
Second.
Any questions, corrections? Ms. Donovan?
Thank you. Mr. Chair, I just wanted to point out, I don't believe anybody on the school committee side received a copy of those minutes. So I don't know if it's necessary for us to vote as well, or just the town council. I know the last time we met, Joy and I had taken the minutes, and both sides were, received the minutes, but I don't believe anybody on the school committee side had received those. So I don't know what the proper protocol is for approving them, but at this point, I can tell you that we don't have them.
My suggestion, based on that, as well as at least one other item where there appeared to be some sort of miscommunication or something that didn't make it from one office to the next. One, I would just suggest that we have to make sure that our end and their end are working cohesively to follow up on that, communicate. And with that, personally, I have no problem in just deferring this to the next joint meeting. And that
Okay.
gives everybody plenty of time to receive and review those minutes before we accept them.
Okay, thank you very much.
We do still have to dispose of the motion, though.
I'll take mine back.
Okay, thank you. Agenda item number 4 is to review the provisions of Municipal Health Insurance Reform Act. Mr. Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the council and the school committee and department heads, and I think there might be some union officials here too. So what we wanted to do tonight originally was give you a background briefing on this tome of a memo that some staff and I prepared for you. Unfortunately, I learned this weekend that the school committee, there's a bit of a glitch somehow, and the memo was sent over, but it didn't get distributed to the school committee. So I got it out to Lauren last night, I think it was, and that means that you all have either seen it very briefly or perhaps haven't even seen it till tonight. So the original plan of giving the brief and then asking the school committee to kind of take a consensus on implementing the municipal health reform and then the council a formal vote seems unfair under the circumstances. So I've advised the council before the meeting that if you would like to, there is still sufficient time for you to have the briefing tonight, ask questions, understand it thoroughly. Only the council has to vote. Ordinarily, when I've done this before in other communities, I've always asked the school committee to take a consensus to show support for implementation, but is not a legal requirement. But in as much as the school committee employs well over half, typically 60+% of the employees who this will affect, typically I ask the school committee to do that, and the council typically is interested in the school committee support. So I'll let you folks decide what you want to do with that, but there is not the necessity of a vote tonight if you feel that you're not ready for it. So, with the chair's permission, what I'm not going to do is take you through this whole memo, because we don't have 3 days, And while we're doing that, goodness knows it might snow again and we won't get out of here. So rather, I'm just going to take you through the specific recommendations section in the hope that everyone has read all that voluminous material prior to it. And certainly, if there's any questions, our subject matter expert, Mindy, is with me tonight, and Karen, and myself. And there may be other folks here who have some expertise as well. So we'll share all that expertise. And if there are any questions, let me know, and I'll be happy to go through them. So turning to page 7 of the memo, Roman numeral 3, a multi-year plan, specific recommendations. First, let me preface this by saying we're attempting to accomplish a very specific goal that the council has set earlier this year. The goal is to stabilize health insurance costs for the town and for the employees, and secondly, to create a revenue stream which allows the town to consider increasing the contributory share, how much the town contributes to the employees' health insurance cost. At the current time, we're 50-50. The norm in municipalities is 70-30. So we're substantially below the normal contributory share of 70% for the employer at 50-50. So serious is the problem that I have had at the request of the council doing exit interviews for employees that have left town employment in the last 8 months, conversations with 4 police officers, 3 of whom have left, 1 of whom has not yet left, and they've all indicated that health insurance, the contributory share of the town, is the primary reason for their departure, transfer to another community. These are all good, desirable officers, people that we wanted to keep, but who left because by leaving and going to another community, they experienced an immediate $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 pay increase in the form of contributory health insurance share that they didn't have to make. So it is a significant issue. And I'm sure on the school side, while I don't have any anecdotal advice, I am certain that there are school personnel and teachers that we've lost for the same reason. When you consider how long it takes to attract an employee, to the advertising process and the interview process, fully train an employee because they don't necessarily come to us fully. They may be trained and educated, but they may not be fully trained yet. Take a case of a police officer. We hire them, but then they go away for 6 months to an academy, and we give them partial pay while they're away. Then when they come back from the academy, they have ride-along with a senior police officer, and they're not fully effective for quite some period of time. So by the time a police officer is fully effective, we've made as much as a year to a year and a half investment in them, and when you figure out the amount of dollars, we're talking, easily $50,000 to $150,000 per employee. So when you lose 4 of them, and you start that process all over, you can see this is a significant drain on the community's resources, and you can multiply that times however many teachers, public works workers, library workers, town hall, et cetera, that we've lost over this issue. So, earlier this year, the council adopted a goal to increase that contributory share. Since money is tight, the council did not want to do it out of new tax revenue, but preferred to do it out of savings, money that we were able to save by doing innovative things in the area of health insurance and partner with the employees. So, we started a lengthy investigation, which has culminated in this memo, and even as of 3 o'clock this afternoon, we were having a meeting with Fallon Health Group, and I will give you the outcome of that meeting and some very good news that came out of it. So, number 1, the Municipal Health Reform Act passed some years ago, and basically what it allows the community to do is to take something called the benchmark plan and implement it. And the only bargaining that's required with our bargaining units is to decide what half of the town's first-year savings, which must be returned to the employees by law, how the employees would like to receive that. And there's many, many ways to do it. It can be a check, it can be a premium holiday where the town pays the premium, it can be deposited in a health savings account, a health reimbursement account. Lots of ways to do it, but that's a discussion you're required to have. After that first year, the town keeps 100% of its savings, and the employee keeps 100% of their savings. Now, what is the benchmark plan? Along with this law passing, the law established something called the benchmark plan. You all know what the GIC is. The Group Insurance Commission insures all state employees, provides their health insurance. It also provides health insurance for however many cities and towns want to join it. And there's both an old process for a town to go in, and there's a new streamlined process, which is part of the same law. Many cities and towns joined the GIC. The most heavily enrolled plan in the GIC is called the benchmark plan, the one that has the most people that take it. The summary of the benefits is the level of benefits, co-pays, deductibles, and coverages, which together constitute this so-called benchmark plan. Cities and towns are allowed to take that plan and mirror it and put it into effect and share that first year of savings. Now, that would be a pretty simple thing if that were the end of the story. Unfortunately, it gets a little more complicated. By virtue of those many cities and towns coming into the GIC over the course of the last 4 years, the only reason, stop to think about it, that a city or town would join the GIC is to save money. There's no reason to go into the GIC as an individual city or town and pay more. So typically, cities and towns went into the GIC because the GIC had lower premium than they did. Unfortunately, it is axiomatic in health insurance underwriting that your premium is composed of claims, administration, and reinsurance, and plan design. What are the features your plan has? So when a city or town is paying more premium, it's because they have a richer benefit plan, or they have more claims, or both. So when a city or town joins the GIC and they have more claims, which is pretty much the case, and they save money because their premium goes down, they introduce into the GIC a poorer claims pool than the GIC formerly had. If you want to think of it in simple terms, more sick people. Simple as that. And what does that do to the GIC when that plays out over 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 cities and towns with 10 or 20 or 30 or 100 or 150,000 new members? What plays out is that the GIC slowly gets to be a more higher claims pool with worse experience, and that pushes up premium or cost sharing. Cost sharing are tools that cost is transferred back to the employee, which lowers premium, or premium has to be raised. What the GIC did for 4 consecutive years, unfortunately, is they had extremely low increases in the 1s and 2s, and they did not contemporize or change their benefit plan design. So the benefit design stayed pretty much the same, and the premium didn't rise. Many of us who observe this have been saying for some time now that the GIC was absolutely headed for a train wreck. And the train wreck finally got announced about 4 months ago. It actually got announced in the spring of this year, very quietly, when the GIC indicated to the legislature that it was going to post a $35 million deficit, and they asked for a transfer, and it occurred. That should be troubling to all of us, because in that GIC pool are many cities and towns with many employees who are insured, and the state transferred broad-based taxes that we all pay, and that $35 million went to the benefit of the GIC and partially to those cities and towns and those employees who got a bailout. Southbridge didn't get a bailout. The legislature didn't send us any money to stabilize health insurance, but they did do it with the GIC. When the GIC came back in the fall and announced that they had a $160 to $190 million deficit, you can imagine that the legislature was a little cool to react before they said, sure, we'll just give you another bailout. Because questions started to be asked, and the questions were, well, how do you have such a huge deficit? And these answers slowly emerged over analysis. The outcome of all that is that the GIC, which is a board composed of union and public officials, had a series of meetings with their consultant and came up with a plan with 3 alternatives, including those 3 alternative plan design changes, a 9.5% rate increase. For the last month and a half, they've been debating exactly which of those 3 plan design changes they will put in, which all feature higher co-pays and deductibles of some type. And just last Friday, they finally made their decision, and I won't go through it in detail. I have a copy in my office. Actually, I've got a copy right here, if anybody cares. But basically what they did is they raised those co-pays and deductibles, so employees will pay more of the cost through co-pays and deductibles, but that pushes down the need for more premium, and so the combination of raising the co-pays and deductibles and increasing the premium 9.5 will make up somewhere between 60 and 100 million of the GIC's deficit. They're going to roll the deficit forward into next year, knowingly, and next year they're going to have to do more plan design changes and/or premium increases. Now, why do I tell you this? Why does it matter to us what the GIC is doing? Because when the GIC makes those plan design changes, increases those co-pays and deductibles, the benchmark plan, which we're allowed to adopt, now becomes a new plan. The difference between where our co-pays and deductibles currently are in our plan design and the GIC's new benchmark plan with its higher co-pays and deductibles becomes the difference which we're allowed to implement, and those plan design changes result in a dramatic decrease in premium. Now, this isn't magic. The reason the premium goes down is because the co-pays and the deductibles cause people who are covered by the plan to pay more. They pay more in the form of co-pays and deductibles. It's called cost sharing. Some people call it cost transference. One of the realities in health insurance today is if people who are insured by insurance don't start to have more of an incentive to be intelligent consumers of health insurance, then premium will just continue to rise and escalate, and it'll literally bankrupt all of us. So we ask employees to increasingly take higher co-pays and deductibles, and we provide options for how they can manage those and not incur quite so much. The good news is, in most cases, actually about 93% statistically of any group our size, 93% of all the employees in that group will not hit the maximum co-pays and deductibles in any given year. But 100% of that leaves 7% that will. But 100% of the group will experience the benefit of the premium decrease, and the premium decrease will be dramatic. For most people in the group, the premium decrease less or compared to their increase in co-pays, most employees will make out better. They will actually save money. And we'll be doing some mathematical illustrations for the employees to show them that. For a small group, they won't. And that's a challenge that we're looking at now to see how we can help them out. But at the end of the day, the whole concept of group insurance is simple. You have a bad year, personally, you, your family, you pay more. Not all of it, but some of it. But the cost, the full cost, is shared by all the other people in the plan. You have a good year, you're paying more than you should, but you're helping others that aren't having such a good year. And sometime it'll be your turn. Remember, 93% won't hit it, 7% will, statistically. So, by implementing the Municipal Health Reform Act and accepting that benchmark plan, we can go to the carriers and we can say, give us a quote for what you would insure us for under that benchmark plan. And we take that premium savings and we show it to the employees. We send a formal notice to them. We show them the illustration, and we say, here's what you're going to save. Here's what your new co-pays and deductibles are going to be. Here's what the town's going to save. And how would you like to divvy up that first year town savings? But because of the council's goal, I'm recommending the accomplishment of the council's goal, and I'm going to recommend that 100% of the savings permanently be shared with the employees in the form of whatever dollars we save, we turn right around and we put them right back into that percent that the town pays. Now, how good might this be? Last year, Mindy had a comparison done between, this was from May 1st last year. Our plan year starts on May 1st. So Mindy had a comparison done between our status quo renewal, our current co-pays and deductibles, and the benchmark plan. And because those were pretty close at that point, we were only going to save, I think, about $83,000. It's actually in the memo here. $83,000 is enough money, that's the town part of the savings, is enough money to increase the contributory share of the town about 3%. So we could have gone from 50-50 to 53-47. No one's going to write home about that, I'm thinking. And it frankly doesn't accomplish the council's goal by a long shot. However, and so a lot of this memo is about other alternatives that we looked at. But in just the last few weeks, all this news that I've just told you about the GIC is broken. Now we believe that once the GIC's changes to the benchmark plan are fully understood by our insurance company, and we are competitively shopping the town's insurance with all the carriers, Harvard Pilgrim, Tufts, Fallon, Blue Cross. What we're hoping is that we will get a good premium with a lot of savings in it that will allow us to make that dramatic shift. How dramatic? We have some preliminary numbers that suggest that that shift could save the town as much as $300,000, maybe more. Were the town to save $300,000, we would have enough to make a contributory share shift of somewhere around 8 or 9%. That's pretty meaningful. Simultaneously, as we've been looking at that, we've also been looking at something else, and that's further on in these alternatives, something called an EPO, an exclusive provider organization. Now, you've all heard of HMOs, Health Maintenance Organization. HMOs, PPOs, POSs, indemnity plans, all of those are variations on a theme. It's all ways to provide health insurance in different ways. An EPO is a health insurance plan that says to a facility, typically a hospital, in return for steep discounts, steep premium reductions, we will give you a vast majority of our employees' business. We will require them to go to you for primary care physician services and for the majority of their medical care. Specialty care and highly specialized care, like oncology, cardiac, et cetera, will be done at other settings, typically Boston hospitals. In return for all that block of business, a health carrier or a hospital, or both in partnership, will give the town very steep discounts. So we have been having conversations with Fallon Health Group, which you probably know is headquartered in Worcester, and this is the part of the state where Fallon is they are the major insurer in this part of the state, far and away. They have a relationship with Harrington Hospital. Harrington is one of their hospital partners. Well, it turns out that when you analyze the statistics for where our employees go, the vast majority of them already go to Harrington. So that realization paved the way for the potential creation of an EPO, a partnership between the town of Southbridge, Fallon, and Harrington Hospital. And we are right now in the middle of analyzing that as an option. And if that turns out to be beneficial, then there is certainly every reason to hope and believe that we will have a very, very large savings by simultaneous implementation of both the benchmark plan, which is the plan Fallon would manage for us, with most of the care being provided by Harrington Hospital, and we would have a double whammy discount. We'd have two major things pushing down the premium, and that would likely be well in excess of $300,000. Now, there's always a fly in the ointment, and here's the fly in the ointment on this one. Implementation of the Municipal Health Reform Act, i.e. the benchmark plan, is not a bargainable requirement. We're only required to bargain what do we do with half our savings, and in this case, we'd be proposing permanent transference to all the employees, and I'm pretty sure that the bargaining units are going to find that's a pretty good deal, and I don't think anybody's going to argue about it. However, the EPO, because the EPO will slightly change the employee benefits, the EPO no carrier can exactly match the benefit structure of another carrier. Currently, we are a Blue Cross Blue Shield customer through the Mass Interlocal Insurance Association. which is an umbrella organization of cities and towns that contracts with Blue Cross Blue Shield and delivers insurance to cities and towns through a municipal shared trust. That Blue Cross Blue Shield benchmark plan has certain plan design features. The EPO would mirror it, but not precisely. No carrier's plan is the identical one to anyone else's. It's close. And from an actuarial point of view, it's what's called about 99-point-something% identical. But that little difference has to be bargained. You cannot, in Massachusetts, change a single feature of the plan design of a health insurance plan without bargaining with the unions. And so because the EPO would slightly change plans, we would have to bargain it. So if we want to have the further cost savings of the EPO, then in a very short period of time, we will need to bargain that. So it is a challenging task ahead of us, but at stake is the potential extremely large savings of money, which will accrue to our employees in their half of the premium they pay, will accrue to the town, and it will leave, I think, the room to not just reach the 10% 60-40 shift, but potentially some higher cost shifting on top of that. In the case of the implementation of both the EPO and the benchmark plan simultaneously, and depending upon the level of savings, I would not necessarily recommend that we provide 100% of the savings in the form of increased contributory share, but that the town maybe be allowed to save some of that savings, but that the bulk of it be put into the contrib share. My goal would be to settle with a recommendation to council somewhere between 60 to 65% paid by the town and the balance paid by the employees. And that would be the goal. As we sit here tonight, we cannot give you the exact figures because the GIC just voted Friday on which plan they're implementing. We just got word today. Maya, our current insurer, is massaging those figures and preparing our renewal quote. We will be one of the first towns to get a renewal quote because most towns' plan year is July 1. Our plan year is May 1, so we're 2 months earlier. So we'll be one of the first towns to get a quote, and I expect to have it within 14 odd days. As soon as we get that quote, we will know exactly how much we can save just by implementing the benchmark. Simultaneously, Fallon, we sent them away today, telling them that this is very interesting and we want to hear their numbers. So we sent them away and said, take the benchmark plan, take that benefit design, put it on your platform, your Fallon HMO PPO combination, and come back to us with a quote for what the premiums would be. And so I'm hoping within 14 to 21 days to have 2 quotes for the benchmark plan, one from Fallon with an EPO model, one from Maya with an HMO PPO model, and see how the numbers spin out, and then come back to the council and the school committee and the department heads with specific numbers, and on that occasion, share with you the specific numbers. On that night, we will serve formal notice on the unions. We're required to notify the unions 2 days before the date on which the council will consider the vote to implement the Municipal Health Reform Act, so that the employee unions can be represented and heard. They can say to the council what their thoughts are. And so I would hope that we could accomplish that by that first meeting in March. I forget the date of that. I'm shooting for that. I don't know if we'll make that date because we're waiting for quotes to come in, and that is out of our control. We do know that on the basis of the town's current claims record, that Harvard Pilgrim and Tufts refused to give us a quote. We also petitioned Hampshire County Health Trust, which is a large consortium. Charlton belongs to it, so does Dudley. We petitioned them for admission into their group, and they refused, again, based on our poor claims record. So if we are able, with this poor claims record that has had a lot of carriers, frankly, reject us, to accomplish a substantial savings by all this maneuvering, then we will have pulled off, I think, a very, very successful endeavor which will accrue enormously to the interest of our taxpayers and our employees as well. That is the brief I wanted to give you, and I would invite both any comments that Mindy or Karen might choose to make and council school committee questions through the chairman.
Just briefly before we open it up, so if I understood you correctly, the benchmark piece is not negotiable, whereas the EPO is negotiable, would have to be negotiated. The impression I'm getting is none of this has been shared to date with any of the unions, correct?
Just some informal conversations here and there with union leaders, and with the DPW, since we are in bargaining right now, we had a little more in-depth conversation, but I wouldn't characterize any of those conversations as getting to the level where it needs to be, where we're talking actual numbers.
And has there been any feedback or response, positive, negatively, as yet?
I've had a lot of, and this is in no way binding any bargaining unit, but I've had leadership of bargaining units say to me that, you know, if we want to implement the Municipal Health Reform Act, ordinarily they'd only be entitled to half of that first year savings. So if it were the council's will, and with the school committee's concurrence, I hope, to give that money back in the form of a permanent increase, that they would be absolutely supportive of that.
I'll open it up at this point. Councilor Vecchia?
I have a couple of questions to the chairman, to the town manager. The letter states share to be increased to 70-75%, but you mentioned 60-65% a little while ago, so now you've changed your mind already?
No. Shifting 25% in a single year is a virtual impossibility. The 75%, 70 to 75, I think is a multi-year goal. I think it's achievable, but it's going to take a long time to get there.
Second question, you have no increase to the tax levy. You're going to have to prove that. How are you going to prove that? We're going to have to verify the figures.
Because 100% of the contributory share increase for the town would be made out of the savings. Whatever we save, we put toward contributory share.
Well, I'd have to see the figures before I verify. Is this going to go to subcommittee?
Well, if that's up to the council, I can do that. I'm going to say that the timelines are going to be very, very tight on this, because this all has to be done, bargained, and implemented 30 days prior to May 1st, because if we're going to go from Maya Blue Cross to Fallon, we have to do a complete re-enrollment of all employees. That's about a 30-day process, so that on May 1, the employees actually have the card. Now, you don't have to do that. On May 1, the employee can have their piece of paper enrollment form, but if you've ever been through that process, it's a bit of a nightmare. You go into your doctor's office, you get the enrollment form. They don't want to see that.
Okay,
They want to see the card.
I'm all set, thank you.
Councilor Clements?
Thank you. In regard to the previous comments, I would have expected it to, at some point, go to general government, as has insurance explanations and this type of thing in the past. It gives the general public more opportunity to come ask questions, gives us more opportunity to ask questions. I realize that some of us had papers and some of us didn't. Some of us had papers that were missing pages. I'm not sure about the rest of you. Some of the, even though the flow seemed right, the numbers are wrong and therefore missing some parts. So I think we all need to, I'll show you mine after. I think we all need to really make sure we understand what's being asked of us here. I think it's great that obviously that's the goal. The goal is to save money on all ends here, especially for the employees, so that we can retain our employees. That's a great option in these days when we spend so much on training them. So it would be my, first off, as far as voting this evening, I would have not anticipated that we would have voted on this evening to move forward. However, in expediency, certainly we can set up a meeting, 2 meetings, whatever it takes, and get them as quickly as possible in the next coming weeks to get this, to get a little more discussed, and perhaps you'll have more information. As it progresses, that will keep us informed. Anybody's welcome to attend meetings.
It could well end up being the case that when we get the numbers back, because there's some work that we'll need to do to assemble spreadsheets to translate that, that there could be, you know, a week gap between that and the next council meeting, and boom, right there's your subcommittee meeting. So
Right.
that probably will work out fine.
And we can set some meetings tentative to include this topic, and obviously, if there's nothing to report, we can, we can change that or skip that particular item. I know there are other items coming up, on that regard. I also know, we have in the past had a number of concerned union members who would come to some of these insurance change meetings and voice their opinion. I think, again, it gives time for them to come, ask questions, get answers, or do a little more research and get them the answers they need to feel comfortable with the changes. In the past, I've heard things such as, why don't you, this is a great idea, things are changing, we need to save you money, and people would say, well, I just don't want to change, I like the way it is. But as you said, the world is going to more shared costs. The less you use of insurance, the better it is for everyone all about. So if you can keep yourself healthy and do some, to use some of the incentives that they offer, then it makes sense that you should pay a lesser premium and only pay for what you're actually using. So I applaud you for moving forward with this, and I hope that we can come to some positive outcome shortly. But I'll do my best.
Ms. Quinney?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the town manager. My first question would be, has the IAC heard any of this?
I'm sorry?
The IAC, have they had a meeting and heard any of this information that you've shared with us tonight?
Do the teachers have to have a meeting? Is that what you're asking?
The IAC is...
Oh, the IAC. Actually, the way the law is written, upon notification to the employee unions that the council will consider this change, the unions are allowed to attend the meeting, voice their comments, then the council votes. If the council votes to implement it, then within a specified period of time, we notify the IAC, and we simultaneously form something called a PEC, which is a Public Employee Committee. It's a little different than an IAC, similar but different. And the PEC forms, and the PEC is the body that we formally bargain with the savings. Now, the PEC does not have to form. If the bargaining units waive their right to do so, and they might well in this case, because rather than getting their share for 1 year, the proposal is to give it to them permanently. So if the council says on the night, implement this and we're okay with sharing the savings, then it's probably going to be a very fast process that could be done in a day. Maybe not. Maybe the unions will say, no, we want to form the PEC and do that, in which case we're going to have to engage in that process. But since this is such a dynamic situation right now, I can't get numbers until the GIC voted Friday, and I can't get numbers out of the MMA until they vote. Their board of directors is meeting tomorrow, and they vote to implement, and then they go get the quotes for us. Those time windows are getting very short and may well end up being impossible to make without either extending our planned year from May 1 to June 1. We can do that. It's very cumbersome, but it's possible. Or having the union say, look, we're going to waive that 60-day bargaining period and get this done, because it's in everyone's interest to do so.
So I guess that means the IAC hasn't met.
We have nothing to give them yet.
Well, my understanding is the Insurance Advisory Committee is comprised of key union players in order to advise the town regarding things that are potentially under consideration. So my concern out the gate would be if the IAC hasn't met and hasn't provided any advisory input into this current plan, that's concerning to me. Moving forward, I understand how the PEC functions, and as has been stated earlier, I just received all of this information today, so I'm not ready to do anything. But my understanding also, and is a concern, is that if we're able to go to a 65-35 split, that after having transitioned to, after adopting and then implementing the new law, that it would be, say, a PEC, and then we have a group of people that are retired that then would be shifted from the 50-50 that they're at now to the 65-35. Have we laid out how much that would impact the cost savings versus cost expenditure? Because those people currently aren't in bargaining units, therefore they couldn't bargain and they would maintain that 50-50 split.
There is
right?
no proposal to shift the retirees off the 50-50. 50/50 for retirees is pretty universal.
Okay, my understanding and what I had read today would be that they would be shifted to whatever because they would have
That is not correct.
a PE, they would be part of that PEC.
They have a member that represents them on the PEC, but a shift in the contributory share is not a bargainable issue for the PEC. The sole issue before the PEC is how to take the sharing of part of the town's first-year savings. That's it. The PEC does not debate a single other thing.
Okay. Thank you. The other concern that I have is where it might be cost savings out the gate, it's very hard to, when you have a insurance rate, you know what you're paying every month. When you become ill and potentially unable to work, it's very hard to then be able to pay a deductible and co-payments in a time of high stress. So that's another concern that I have, and I'd like to see how those numbers would lay out for families when, you know, some things are unavoidable. There are absolutely health concerns that we can prevent, and there are other tragedies that can't be prevented, and to add a burden onto a family who had some sort of a tragedy would, it's a concern.
What we'll have for you the next time we meet on this will be a plan design comparison chart, which will give the major benefits and compare them between what's called status quo, meaning what we have now, the benchmark plan, and the EPO plan. Now, the EPO and the benchmark will be approximately the same thing. Then what we'll have is a second spreadsheet, which will show the current plan renewed, the status quo renewal, whatever Maya says, here's your renewal, the premium breakdown for the new benchmark plan through Maya, and the premium breakdown for the EPO, and all total, so everybody will be able to see all those numbers and the benefit design, and people will be able to say, okay, I understand what this could potentially cost me out of pocket, and I understand what I'm saving. So, unfortunately, it's just not possible to get all that pulled together because the memo was written a month ago, and at that time, what I was recommending was that we negotiate with the unions for higher plan design cost-sharing features so that the union could voluntarily say, okay, we'll do that, it'll cause more savings as long as we get that back in the contrib share. What's happened now is the GIC has done that for us. Unfortunately, it's happening right now. Now, the GIC is exquisitely aware that all over the state, they're impacting 351 cities and towns, and there are some of us with early renewals, i.e. April, May, June renewals. And so they're working very hard to get this buttoned up to assist us with those early renewals and still be able to get through the process. So everybody is cooperating to produce a good result, put it that way. But it is an extremely challenging environment, to say the least.
And in having to negotiate with each individual unit, what happens if a particular union decides that they don't want to move forward? How does that process unfold?
Well, the town is free to bargain different benefit designs with different unions and different contributory shares with different unions as well. So we're one union to decide that it didn't want to take advantage of this. There's every possibility we will simply have a different plan design for that bargaining unit.
Okay, thank you.
Just building off Ms. Quinney's questions, if I understood you correct, there is a regulatory statute in which essentially you'd have to give a 2-day notice. Is there any way, how much leeway time can we give above and beyond that? Because 2 days, considering the scope and the impact of this, seems like an awful short amount of time.
Sure. What I would plan to do is the moment we get those spreadsheets in hand or know that the delivery is imminent, i.e. we'll have them, in 2 days, the minute I know that, I will serve notice on all the bargaining units, and I'm hoping, depending again upon, it depends on when does that material arrive and when's the next council meeting. But what I'm hoping is that we'd be able to give the bargaining units a week or two notice so that they have a chance to fairly digest everything, because it is very complicated. And I will make myself, as I know Mindy and Karen will, and our consultant, available, and we will ask them for a meeting where we'll do our very best to explain all this. And I think Aaron had a good idea to meet with our IEC. I get the impression our IEC has not been active, but perhaps we could activate it
Mr. Carrasco, Councilor.
and open a dialogue with them.
Yes, I understand that we have a lot of questions and a lot of information is not concrete yet. So I would make a motion right now to send this to subcommittee, because I don't feel comfortable voting on something that we still don't have the numbers.
Okay. Any further discussion? Mr. Abrahamson.
Mr. Chair, obviously don't oppose the motion that I don't get to vote on, but is this the plan or the law that Governor Patrick signed into law in 2011?
The law that passed in 2011, yeah.
Yes. And so there are some towns and cities who implemented that 3 years ago. They began the implementation.
Yeah, it's
of
well
that.
over 50% of the cities and towns in the state have now implemented. I don't have the latest count, but
Right.
if you go on the DOR website, Department of Revenue, they have a map, and they can tell you, but it's getting to where those of us who haven't are very much in a minority now.
So that, and I thank you for that, so that some of the losses that we've had may well have been avoided had this crucial area been dealt with 3 years ago. And I want to commend the town manager, the interim town manager, for taking this on. This is a very complex issue, very important to the town, and that's all I have to say. I thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Thank you. Through you to the town manager, I want to echo Mr. Abrahamson's sentiments when we brought this up years ago and every year since, and for whatever reason, we didn't get very far. We had a joint meeting, I believe it was last year, regarding this very issue. And so when I did receive the memo and saw the work and which had to have been an incredible amount of work to pull this together, I was both grateful and impressed, and I do thank you for doing that. Regardless of how this is going to turn out, this was very important, and I sincerely appreciate your efforts.
Thank you. I do have to tell you all, and thank you, that's very nice. Mindy, the town's treasurer collector, and the person who's primarily responsible for managing the plan, with assistance from Karen, but primarily Mindy has that responsibility. She's been working very hard on this for a long time. And so, I get the enjoyable part of giving this briefing. And Mindy's really the one who's done all the work. And she's been doing it very, very well for 3 years now, and hoping that someone would kind of pick up on this and run with it. So I just want you to know your staff's been doing a terrific job on this.
Any other questions or comments? I would just note that based upon the manager's suggestion, if any of the unions have questions or concerns, feel free to touch base. Open door is always there, so.
Just a quick question on clarification on Councilor Carrasco's motion and second. I know you do
Sure.
a little bit different than we do. Does that mean we don't ask any more questions here on the dais? Any other questions that we may have, we'll do at the subcommittee, the government subcommittee? Is that the subcommittee that it would go to as general government? And then we would take our questions there?
Right, anybody and everybody is welcome to go ask any questions they may have at that meeting.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilor Cummins?
They haven't moved the question. If you still have questions right now, you're welcome to ask. We're still on this subject. Right now, it's discussion.
Oh, I did, but I don't
First,
know if it's inappropriate.
it's not
You
inappropriate.
can-
The people are watching. It's certainly good to
You can
know.
do it now, you can defer to then, you could do both.
Well, I would prefer to do it now, just in case I
Sure.
can't make that meeting, and I have the
By all
questions
means.
here. Thank you for that clarification. A lot of the things the questions that I have through you, Mr. Chair, through the town manager, are simply clarification questions that came up both from reading your memo and from listening to your assertion tonight. The date of the memo, I noticed it was dated 2014. I just want to make sure that it was 2015 that you wrote the memo and that this pertains to this current year.
Yeah, it was actually written, believe this or not, in Aruba. And I don't know, I know that was sometime in the last few months, but
Okay.
it seems like decades ago.
Okay. It's just
It
that
was
ours had a
pre-snowstorms.
January date of 2014, and I
So,
just wanted to make
it
sure
was
that
interactive.
I want to make sure I had the current information, because mine had a date of January 2014, so I just wanted to clarify that.
It went through so many iterations,
sure.
I'm not sure what date it's cut on it
Okay,
anymore.
all right. As long as I have the current one, that's all. That was my biggest concern. The second question that I had, and I don't know, I heard a couple different percentages thrown out tonight, and I just want to make clear that I understand. While you said the goal of the council wasn't specific, are you looking to go, what particular ratio are you looking to go to? Now we're 50-50. Are you looking 70-30, 65-35, 75-25? Based on what you said, where will we be relative to that?
That's really a choice for the council and you know, with the consultation with the school committee. That's not my choice. My goal was to try to get it shifted 10% this year. I felt, frankly, if in my short tenure with you, I could accomplish a 10% shift, that would be monumental.
Sure.
And then the work is not finished. It's going to go on for years to get you to wherever you'd like to be. I will say that 60-40, while a vast improvement, does not put you where the average is for most municipalities, which is
Right.
about 70. Now, the ones that are 75 and above are trying to come down, and the ones that are below 70 are losing employees and trying to come up. So I think everybody's going to meet in the middle somewhere, 65 or 70. The norm over time is that the contrib share will be higher for the employer and lower for the employee, but I think the days of 75-25 even are over. I think you're going to see more 70-30 as being the norm, and everybody's trying to whittle away and get down to that. I think it'll settle around 70-30. Private sector, 50-50 is common. You know, not offering a group plan and making no contribution is getting even more common in the private sector, and the cost-sharing mechanisms are much bigger than the ones we're looking at here even. And I spoke about what I personally think the future health insurance is, whatever the contributory share is. I think it's this thing called consumer-driven or high-deductible health care coupled with an HSA, a health savings account. And we're not quite there, but we're not far from it. So getting from where I hope we'll be on May 1st to a consumer-driven plan in a couple of years, I hope we can make that gap, make that jump, because there's some substantial savings there. And the HSA, just read the memo if you have the time, is an incredibly good tool for our employees. You put money in it tax-free, it accumulates interest tax-free, and when you take it out to spend it on medical care, including Plan B, Medicare when you retire, you can spend it tax-free. So it's what's called triple leveraged. They're known as health IRAs, and they are the single most powerful tax leverage health plan, savings plan available in America today. And they are largely unutilized by government, tremendously utilized in the private sector. That's where I think we're headed.
That's great news. Thank you. The other question that I had was, you mentioned that Tufts and Pilgrim Healthcare had rejected us or didn't want to give us a claim based on our poor claims record.
Rather than rejected, let's just say declined to quote.
All right, declined to quote.
Rejected
I
is
was
so
wondering,
harsh.
how far back of a history do they look at? And if they're looking at a certain time period, and that was a poor time period for our employees. However, once we start moving forward and perhaps our history, if you will, gets better, then we will have a different profile. So just curious, how far back do they look? And is there any potential way that in so many years, we may have a better profile, and then if we needed to move or look at a
Underwriters-
different program again, they would want to quote us at another point in time?
Underwriters typically look back 3 years,
Okay.
including the current year, the year-to-date, and 2 or 3 years prior, if the data is available. Current situation is we have, I believe, 7 large claims. Mindy, you can correct me if I'm wrong, 7. When I say large, I mean those claims are each in excess of $75,000 apiece. Now, what happens is, after they hit the $75,000, the insurance company has stop-loss insurance, and they have an attachment point at $75,000, and the insurance company starts paying after that. But 7 times $75,000 is an astronomical number. That's on us. That's on our claims experience. After that is what's called pooling charges. So
Okay.
now 2 of those have dropped off, and it gets to be a ghoulish exercise, because you're talking about, do folks live, do they get better, it's that sort of a conversation. And we, of course, don't know who is who. We just get statistics that say claim number 1, claim number 2. And so we look at that and we try to make prognostications. In fact, we were having that conversation today. Where are these large claims trending? 7 claims over 75,000 for a group our size is extraordinarily bad. I've only seen one worse situation in a long time doing this. Now, 2 have ameliorated in one way or another, so that's good news in terms of claims. We don't know the others yet. We're waiting to get some information. So if that situation begins to improve to the tune of 1 or 2 or 3 more, statistically, we wouldn't expect to have more than 2 or 3 claims like that in any given year. When we get down, to 2 or 3, we're pretty normal.
Okay. All right, thank you. The other question I had, it was something relative to Mrs. Quinney's question. Your answer was that if one of the bargaining units didn't like the plan or didn't want to go along with this plan, you would have a different design plan for that particular union. And I'm on the negotiations subcommittee for the school committee, and health insurance, and this is always a key factor that comes up all the time, and it's always on the table because of the 50-50 ratio. I just want to make sure that I understand in my own mind that while a town bargaining unit may be able to obtain a different design plan, on the school side, for the unions that fall on the school side, they do not have that same option, that they in fact will receive whatever it is that the town overall accepts. And I want to make sure, is that correct to think that way?
Well, when it comes to collective bargaining and health insurance, there are a lot of fuzzy lines, and there's not a whole lot of clear, bright lines. And I don't want to get too far into it here in public.
Okay.
But I will say this. First of all, we absolutely don't hope for an outcome where any bargaining group has any different plan design, because that's just so difficult. Moreover, we're one group. Were all the unions wanting to implement a change and one group held out, then we would probably, I would advise you to implement the change, despite the protest of the one bargaining unit, bargain the impasse in good faith, and then implement. Because when you go to outside closure, mediation, arbitration, whatever it is, depending upon the group, the town is in a very good position with respect to bargaining to impasse and implementing without the union's permission, because the majority of them have done it, have agreed. Moreover, I would hope that no bargaining unit would do that, because what we're doing is so overwhelmingly in the employee's best interest.
Sure.
It's my hope that they would look at this and say, this is an historic opportunity. Let's not blow this, because a council that has this as a goal may not come along again soon. And so we ought not to miss this.
I agree with you
and
completely.
I will frankly be saying that to bargaining units. Folks, been doing this for 4 decades, and I have never yet had a governing elected board say the words, could you figure out a way to increase the the town's contributory share? I haven't heard those words before. So this is a marvelous opportunity.
Yes, it is.
And I hope the employees take full advantage of it.
Thank you very much, and I commend you as well. I know that, like Mrs. McLaughlin had said, we'd sat with previous town managers, and we were always told, well, this is what they decided on in 1960, and this is the way it is. And it was a ridiculous answer, but that was the answer that they gave us. So the fact that our situation is changing is tremendous. And my final question is, do you happen to know, I was just curious about our overall plans, our individual plans versus our family plans. Does that play any type of role in this, or do we have one that is a lot higher than the other, or do any of these plans have to do with some of the people that have left? Are the premiums higher for a family plan than an individual plan?
Well, individual plans generally are about half family plans.
Okay.
Roughly. It doesn't always track exactly like that, but about. There has been some discussion about having a 1+1 plan or a spousal plan. They go by different names, but basically Folks that are currently insured under a family plan but only have 2 members would go on a 2-person plan. The problem with that is, in order to do that, you've got to take those folks who were formerly family plans, and the remaining family members, you got to increase their premium dramatically. So the total dollars that has to be collected remains the same.
Okay,
The piece of the pie gets divvied up.
I see.
In communities where the majority of the family members are 1+1s, they kind of like that, and sometimes they manage to get that pushed through, and I've seen employers in towns with 1+1 plans. But it's much more the norm that, particularly in schools, because schools tend to employ younger people, that teachers and other school employees tend to have families. And so when you look at the demographics for the whole family universe, it tends to be dominated by people with 3 or more. So the 1+1s usually don't go over well.
Okay, very good, I'm all set, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Just state your name and address, please.
Derek Clement, 464 Denison Drive. Also the union president of Southbridge Fire Department, Local 2194. I got a phone call this afternoon at 5:30 to notify me that this was going on tonight. I was very surprised that this was going on, that there was a vote being taken without the union rep being notified about it. And I've been with the town manager a few meetings this past couple of weeks, and nothing was said to me about it. And I'd just like to know what the reason is of not notifying the unions about this meeting, which is very important to all of us for this meeting. Mr. Town Manager, what was the reason in not notifying us about this?
Oh, we were trying to hide it from you.
Was that?
I'm kidding. The reason we're not voting tonight is because there wasn't an opportunity. We realized because of all the storms and this whole thing has been postponed and postponed and postponed and postponed. And one of the things that fell through the cracks was the 2-day minimum notification. I also realized that we have no numbers to share yet because of the way this is unfolding with the GIC. So we realized a good week ago that we couldn't fulfill the statutory process yet because we don't have, what we're required to do is demonstrate the numbers at the same time we're briefing the council and providing the statutory 48-hour notice. Couldn't do any of that. Now, we have had conversations about this, you and me.
Correct.
Informal. And as I said earlier, I've had informal conversations with a number of union officials, and I'm not going to put anybody on the spot, but so I don't think it's particularly a secret that this is going on. On the other hand, it was not possible to do the formal notifications tonight. So obviously, where the proposal is to create a great benefit for the employees here, obviously, we're going to be very communicative. As soon as we've got something we can put on a table for you. All I can put on the table right now is the memo, and people are very welcome to it, but it's just all theory at this point. I have no numbers yet, and I don't think I'll have them for 2 or 3 weeks.
So you have no idea what the savings is going to be right now? You have no idea what the savings is going to be right now?
Well, I said earlier this evening, implementation of the benchmark plan last year on May 1st, compared to the status quo plan, would have saved the town about $83,000. This year, we had a preliminary estimate based on an assumption of what the GIC was going to do of about $300,000. What the GIC ended up doing was not what anybody expected, frankly. They did something they put in much more robust cost-sharing measures. And nobody expected that, so I'm hoping the savings potential is even bigger. But I don't know yet.
Now, where's that money going? Once the savings? Does that go back to the town?
No. Again, as I said earlier, my proposal to the council in the memo is to take 100% of the savings and give that to the employees in the form of an increased town contributory share.
Right, that's the process. That's what has to happen. It has to go back to the
No,
employees.
that's not what has to happen. The
It's
law
a negotiated
requires...
item that is negotiated item with the town and the unions with the savings.
Again, let me explain this law. This is a non-negotiable law. This is not bargainable. The town implements it unilaterally. We are required to bargain one thing and one thing alone. What will the town do with 50% of its first-year savings? That's it. Ordinarily, and I have done this in 3 communities, ordinarily, the town takes that 50% and says to the PEC, what would you like? The PECs, for the most part, say, we'd like a premium holiday. So the employee gets, they don't have to pay their premium for a month or 2 months, whatever the money worth. Other towns take it in the form of a health reimbursement account, a credit card loaded with that money. Some towns, the employees want a check, so we just cut them a check and say, here's your share. But that's the only part that's bargainable, what to do with that money for 1 year. That's it. The proposal is to give the employees that money forever. This is a vastly more generous proposal than what the town is required to do.
Okay. The second question I have, I've been on the Insurance Advisory Committee for 19 years now. Okay, I've been there since day one. I've been in the department. I've been on the Insurance Advisory Committee. The problem that the Insurance Advisory Committee has in this town is that we're always notified at the last minute and we're shoved everything down our throats. That's the problem we get with this town, with the Insurance Advisory Committee. It's always the last minute. Our hands are tied behind our back and there's nothing we can do about it. So why wasn't the Insurance Advisory Committee notified about you guys even thinking about this? So we could at least have our meetings and talk about it and look at the process of doing this.
Sure. Let me say this again. We don't have any numbers to share with the IAC. If there's a suggestion to convene a meeting of the IAC and go through the memo like we've done this tonight with the council and the school committee, happy to do it. I've already done that informally with a number of union officials, and we'll continue to do it. But if folks want to have a discussion at the IAC level about the theory of all this, happy to do it. I thought it was a little bit smarter to have that meeting and be able to put real numbers on the table and say, look, here's what we think we can save you. So we'll do it. We'll do it as soon as we can, you know. But bear in mind here, again, the news we're going to be giving you, I think, is about as good news as you've had lately in the area of health insurance. So I don't think when you get it, anybody's going to feel like anything is being shoved down anybody's throat. I'm hoping people are going to clap their hands and say, wow, thanks, council.
Well, the thing is, we just had Southbridge Fire Department hosted a state meeting. We had 300 firemen at LaSalle Hall. It was over 125 towns. And one of the biggest topics was GIC. No one likes it. Not one person likes that. There's probably a few that do, but the majority of them not like GIC. The second thing I have...
Me too.
Don't like it?
Don't like it. No.
Then why would you make your employees go to it if you don't like it?
We're not recommending joining the GIC.
No, because we're not recommended, because the last 3 town managers I had, when we were at 50-50, there was no savings at all. And now you're going to 65-35, or whatever you plan on going. How is there a savings with that when there's none with 50-50? For the last 2 town managers, maybe even 3 town managers that I've been with, all said that. There's no savings for us for GIC. Why is it all of a sudden there's a savings for GIC for the town?
As I explained earlier, the current set of co-pays, deductibles, the plan design features that are in the GIC benchmark plan are higher than the co-pays and deductibles that the town currently has. If you implement those higher co-pays and deductibles, you save premium. Premium goes down. The GIC is currently putting in a package of much higher co-pays and deductibles.
Much higher.
And so that's going to be a dramatic decrease in premium. Now, if the proposal to put these co-pays and deductibles in place, do the benchmark plan, and share 100% of the savings with the employees, including the bargaining units, permanently through a higher contributory share is not acceptable, I suppose we could put it into effect share it for 1 year, and then give it all back to the town, to the taxpayers, if you prefer. But I would have thought that any union official, any, or employee, would say, my God, you're going to save 200, 300, 400,000, and you're going to give it all to us for nothing? That's fantastic. Am I missing something?
It's the co-pays, the previous, we have no control of it. They go up every year,
No, they don't go up every year.
and it's a 3-year contract.
That's not correct. The co-pays and deductibles are set at a certain level, whatever that level is, whatever the GIC commission votes, which has 3 or 4 union representatives on it, and it's whatever they vote. It's not what we vote, it's what they vote. And those co-pays and deductibles go up according to whatever they say, not us.
Correct. Whatever they say, which hasn't been pretty throughout the state. What a place that they're $120 million in debt, GIC, $120 million.
160.
Oh, now it's 160.
Be 170 tomorrow.
I just don't understand why this town would actually want to go to GIC
Point of
for their
clarification.
employees.
Thank you. The proposal before us is not to go with the GIC, is that correct?
Correct.
It is to go with the EPO and something else.
It is to implement the benchmark plan, but we are not joining the GIC. We are just mirroring their plan design. That's all.
Okay.
I would never recommend any municipality join the GIC.
See, I was told that we're going to
because
GIC. I apologize for
the
that.
GIC is headed for even more trouble, and they know it, because everything they're doing this year is only going to make up an estimated 60 to 70 million of the 160 to 190 million deficit. So they've got more things they're going to have to do next year, and they don't know yet what they're going to do. I don't think anyone is going into the GIC this year who hasn't already voted it, and unfortunately, 4 new members are going in this year, and I don't know how they're doing it. I would think they're all working, scurrying to back out if they can. But,
Do you plan on having another meeting with all the unions now, or is this,
what, I'm sorry?
is this the last meeting, or do you plan on having another meeting with all the unions?
Yes, there will probably be multiple meetings with the bargaining units, and it has to come back to the council with real numbers. We don't have the numbers yet.
Correct. Okay. I actually had made a copy of, for all the councils and school committee, of all the steps that actually need to be followed for this whole process. There's actually 5 steps, and it has to be followed to the
If it helps,
T.
Derek, they already have that.
You already have it?
Yes. Grab a copy of my memo over there on the wooden bench, and if there's something missing, let me know, and I apologize, and I'll be happy to get it. But I think it's all there.
And in the interim, if I'm not mistaken, the plan is, we have a motion to do so, to have a meeting of the General Government Subcommittee, which will discuss this, and then, if I understood correctly, at the very least, it would come up before the March 9th Town Council meeting?
I'm hoping. It depends on getting the numbers, but yes, that'd be my hope.
Right. Otherwise, the 23rd of March, presumably. Are you all set, Mr. Lamica?
Yeah, I got a different one. I'll pass out the one I have.
Okay. Are you all set in terms of speaking?
Yeah, I'm all set.
Okay. Councilor Steves?
I have one quick question, is if this means mirroring the GIC plan as it currently, or the one that they just implemented, would we stay at this year's plan going forward, or would we have to mirror it every year going forward, whatever they change it to be?
Unless the legislation changes, each time the GIC implements changes, we have to mirror them.
So in effect, we are going to the GIC?
No, you're not becoming part of the GIC
No, I
pool.
understand that.
You're only mirroring their benefit design. Many communities have higher co-pays and deductibles than the GIC does, but the deal that was negotiated, and by the way, when the law was passed, if you read the legislative history of how it was passed, it was a negotiation between all public sector bargaining units, the mass teachers, the IAFF, the IBPO, and a lot of other unions, AFSCME, et cetera. And this deal was struck cooperatively between all the bargaining units. So there was a lot of pushing, a lot of shoving, a lot of give, a lot of take, and we came up with a bill that was a good compromise and worked for everybody, basically.
Councilor Vecchia? Sure, as long as we are all set with speakers. I assume we have another speaker who'd like to come up. By all means, just name and address, please.
Maria Murray, 26 Lynn Lane, also president of the SEA. I was also not notified. I have not participated in any conversations. As the union head, you talked about informal talks. I've never met you nor spoken with you. I did contact your office in December asking about the IAC. I was told that there's no changes planned and no meeting scheduled. I then contacted your office again in January, asking for the names of the other presidents so I could speak with them, and I was instead sent an email about buying squares on a bicentennial calendar, nothing about the IAC. So I just found out about this meeting today, and I'm a little disheartened, to say the least. I love savings. If the plan is so wonderful and great, I think it should be shared with everybody, and we should know about it, instead of feeling like we have to rush here and try to figure out what's going on. So I'm a little upset with that, frankly. And I'm the one that called Derek to find out if he knew anything, and he didn't either. So I also talked to my contact on the police department, and he wasn't notified either. So,
No union was notified.
yeah, none of us. So that's very disheartening. And especially if it's so wonderful, then we should want to jump on board with it. You should probably be trying to, talk to us, sell it to us, make it known to us. We are also members of the town. We live here, pay taxes here, vote for the council here. So we want to be part of the process, not like an afterthought. So that's kind of what it feels like right now. And I'm also concerned about these GIC look-alike plans, because, yeah, you get savings in the form of that split difference, but then you pay more in your co-pays and deductibles. If the plan has a $2,000 deductible, then that's out of pocket right up front. And you can implement changes to lifestyle to try and mitigate some things, but there are conditions that you can't mitigate, that you have no choice. They just befall you. And so I'm concerned about that for some people. And meeting those $2,000 deductibles could be hard. And that's all I have right now, because I wasn't prepared to speak.
One quick note, if it helps. I think there's a bit of a misunderstanding about the IAC. The town manager doesn't call meetings of the IAC. The IAC is an independent body which forms itself. I believe the unions nominate representatives to it, and I think the council appoints them, and that probably happened in the ages ago. And then the committee elects a chairman, and the chairman calls meetings. I don't call meetings. Mitty doesn't call meetings. So if the IAC is not meeting, I would strongly urge you to find out who the chairman is and take it up with him or her and say, why are we not meeting?
Well, I was told when I got this position as president that it became my job to represent my union on the IAC. I was not informed of that prior to being voted into office, so I didn't know that was one of my jobs. So when I contacted the town manager's office to find out who the other presidents were, I didn't get their names.
Yeah, I don't think we know.
So,
I'm sorry, but I don't think
you're
we
saying
know.
that you speak to them informally, so.
Again, the IAC is not a body of the town.
But you're saying that you
It's-
spoke to the heads of the unions.
No. It is a representative of the bargaining units, 7 people, with, I believe, the treasurer is an ex officio member. And the bargaining units, if there are exactly 7 of them, each would designate a member. If there are 9 bargaining units, just for sake of discussion, I don't know how many there are, they have to kind of figure out who's going to be the 7 representatives. So the bargaining units designate a member. It's not automatically the president. That's up to the bargaining unit. I don't frankly know what the history of the IAC is here, but I've been told that it hasn't been active in a long, long time. And frankly, I wouldn't have dreamed in 100 years to call it together because it's non-existent. So
Right.
if the employees, the unions, want it to exist, you must be proactive and create it. We don't create it. You do. Read the statute.
I understand that.
Okay. I've just heard it said now 3 or 4 times, why didn't I call a meeting of the IAC? I don't call meetings of the IAC.
But I think you could notify them that things were going on.
If we knew who, we might have. I don't think we know who.
All right. So I guess I'll ask my question directly then. What union leaders did you speak to about this?
The formal notice will go to the union presidents, the formal notice, when the law requires us to have numbers. We have no numbers to share. Again, the GIC just voted Friday what the plan design is going to be. The carriers are all trying to put together their plan to mirror it and then get quotes out to the cities and towns so we know what it is we're saying to you. We don't know what we're saying to you yet. As soon as we have it, a formal notice, as the chairman of the council asked, when will the unions get notified? The minute we have that information, or suspect that in a few days we'll get it, we'll send out a notice and say, we're telling you this is going back in front of the council. If any bargaining unit wants to have a sit down and a chat about it, or everybody would like to come together and have a chat about it, more than happy to do that. Happy to go to 10 meetings if that's what you'd like. Happy to help. But we can't tell you what we don't know. We can't call you and say, let's have a meeting and tell you what we don't know.
So then, what union leaders did you informally speak about this with? Because earlier you stated that you spoke with union leaders.
In the course of my conversations and meeting certain union leaders over the course of the last 6-7 months, and this does not include any school unions, I've had conversations about this general topic and said to them, if we did the benchmark plan and the council were of a mind to share that money on a permanent basis to increase the contributory share, does that sound like a good thing? Obviously, the answer came back universally, yeah, it's a great thing. The GIC's decision to increase the cost-sharing mechanisms dramatically has just happened in the last 45 days. So it's all new information that we're all still trying to digest. There's no attempt to hide anything from anybody. If we were going to hide it, we wouldn't be on TV tonight. It's simply a matter of we don't have the information to share other than that memo, and you're very welcome to it, and you're going to see of the size of the memo, this much of it deals with what we're talking about tonight. The rest of it is all about the town, a lot of other concepts and ideas about health insurance. We're just talking about one little piece of it tonight, kind of as a opening to the discussion.
So you still didn't answer my question. What union leaders did you speak with? Since you didn't speak to, you said informally that you have spoken to several heads of unions.
Yes.
And you have yet to say which ones they were. They were not the school ones, apparently, because you just said that.
You know, I'm going to respond to you this way. I know you've asked me 3 times, and I haven't answered you for a very simple reason, because I don't know if they want me to tell you what I had for a conversation with them. That was not, I didn't say to them, could I have a conversation with you and could I tell the world? I said to them, could I have a conversation with you? And we did, and that was that. And so I'm not going to share that.
Okay, but you made it seem like you were speaking with union leaders earlier when you said, I've had many informal conversations with union leaders. You made it appear as if you were conversing with all of us, when in fact you weren't.
And your point is what? That I'm lying?
I didn't say you were lying. I said you made it appear as if you were talking to all of us, when in fact you only talked to a few.
And now we're talking.
I didn't hear what you just said.
And now we're talking. Now. And as soon as we have information that can be shared, it will be shared. If I hadn't had any conversations with any union leaders prior to tonight, sorry, there's no information to share. I did report that in the bargaining with the DPW, because we are in that bargaining, that we had extensive discussions about this. Check with the bargaining team. I can report that much. But I cannot report on a private conversation with a union member, or a citizen, or a councilman, or a school committeeman, unless I ask their permission to report it. And so, no, I'm not going to tell you who I had conversations with. And if you don't want to believe me, that's your privilege. But I'm not a liar, ma'am.
I did not say you were a liar.
You're certainly insinuating it.
No, I asked who, because you made it seem like it was all of us, and it wasn't, that's all.
I understand the point of contention there.
But I'm not calling someone a liar, and I don't want it left that way. I did not call you a liar, that was not my intention.
Understood.
I agree with you 100%. We could talk about this all night. Okay, you're not going to get an answer.
That's
So
fine.
I'm sorry. Okay.
I'm totally
you.
fine.
Are you all set, Ms. Murray? Do you want to continue with the floor, or you?
I have one other question.
Sure.
I want to know if you're willing to meet with us, would you meet with us all at once? Or would you meet with us one by one, since you met with some already?
Anywhere, anytime, however many of you would like to meet, I am there. I'm here days, nights, weekends, holidays. You let me know. I'll be happy to meet with you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Other council comments?
Sorry, but I do have a question, because we were handed a document from Mr. Lamica, and I just have a question, if he's still here, as to where exactly you got this document. It's not, I don't believe it comes directly, it looks like an interpretation, so I'm just curious, because there's a paragraph 3 is in direct discord with an explanation we've been given, so I'm just curious, where did you get this document for how this is implemented? So that because we all got it, and I'd like to know before we leave here that we're reading.
Believe it or not, that document came from 5:30. I got to notice that we were having a meeting here. I had a couple hours. I called my attorney, union attorney, and my union attorney emailed that to me, and I printed it off. So that's where that is from. That is from the union attorney of Local 294.
Okay, thank you. Then I'll just, I'd be curious, we can discuss that in our next meeting, perhaps, as to why the discord on Section 3 of it, compared to what we, but thank you. Thank you.
Ms. Quinney?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to state that Francine Farland takes the minutes for the IAC, and she's in the assessor's office, and I believe the last time they met was this spring, so there might be minutes prior to that, but she would certainly have who was present there at those meetings for people who are looking at as to who to contact. That might be a great place to start. Thank you.
Mr. Abrahamson?
I printed this out. It says, your guide to understanding the new Municipal Health Insurance Reform Act. And this is put out by Fallon Community Health Plan. Now, whether this is dated or not, I don't stand by it. I'll just read what it says. It says this out, and I'm just reading one thing. This outline provides a brief overview of Section 21 of the Municipal Health Insurance Reform Act and the proposed administration and finance regulations, and should be used in conjunction with official government documents. And number 1 says, you provide advance notice of intent to vote. How long does it take? At least 5 calendar days. And it says 5 calendar days in advance of any vote to elect to make changes to health insurance under Section 21, the municipality must send a notice to each union and the Retired State, County, and Municipal Employees Association that they are going to vote. Once a vote approves making changes to health insurance, the municipality must first evaluate coverage and determine the savings that may be realized after the first 12 months of implementation. Once this has been determined, the municipality shall notify its IAC, Insurance Advisory Committee. So it would appear, at least according to Fallon, that it is a committee of this board. Its IAC of estimated savings. So it appears that some of the concerns that have been raised tonight are also mirrored here.
Do we have anyone else?
my citizen. I listened to this tonight for the first time, and I go back to the national conversation. And it seems like it goes back to, if you like your insurance, you can keep your insurance. You said that here tonight. If you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. You did not say that there tonight. You have long-range plans of going to a Harrington EPO type of thing. Boston has some of the best doctors in the country, which means in the world. Currently, the health insurance covers those doctors. And if you have a choice in your doctor, that is a very big personal choice, not one that should be taken away. And the plans are not known because, honestly, you're being asked to vote tonight on something you want to pass that you got to pass to find out what's in it, because you don't have any numbers, you don't have any statistics, you have nothing but a wish. And I think you owe the town employees a lot better, an awful lot better, an awful lot better. After a snowstorm, lots of verbal praise for plowing the streets, as well it should be. When the fire department does something heroic, plaques, citations, they get their due. Nice verbal, which is appreciated, I'm sure, by them as well as the towns for having them there. What we heard tonight is that the split is a problem in recruitment. And we were told that a higher split would help recruitment. But when you increase the out-of-pocket expenses, I contest that will hurt recruitment. That will hurt the talent level that we have in our town. And no one has said that. But I'm not selling the insurance program. I'm saying, this is what I'm hearing, this is what I'm thinking, and to do this in this manner, as you've heard from other people here tonight, whether you're obligated to do it or not, if this is a team effort, if this is a group concern, I think you swung for the fences and strike one. Thank you.
Councilor Steves?
Just a quick point. Mike, we actually are not voting on anything tonight on this. In fact, one of the things, there's a motion to send it to general government. None of us have seen any numbers. This is the first time any of us have, well, certainly all of us that are newly elected have even talked about this before. This is the first time I've ever talked about this issue. And I agree with you that we need to be looking at the impact not only on the town's budget, but also on the co-pays and those other things, because those can be exceptionally expensive even when the rates themselves drop. As we all know, anybody who has insurance has seen that. The insurance prices are going up, they go up every year. And that needs to be one of the things we calculate too.
Right, but together, a lot can be accomplished.
I agree.
And I've unfortunately seen how things get pushed in this town, and it's concerning, it's alarming, and I'm here to tell you there's a different and better way to do it. And I hope you consider that. Thank you.
Okay. Mrs. McLaughlin?
No, I was just going to say that it was my recollection at the beginning of the meeting that the town manager had mentioned that there was going to be no vote taken on the basis that some people didn't receive information prior. So that was my understanding at the beginning of the meeting, that stage was set for this agenda item.
Mr. Abrahamson.
I'm sorry, I just can't resist this, but when I hear the Obamacare mantra, I have to say that if we had a single-payer system, we wouldn't be doing this at all. So I thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, we will have a roll call on the motion to send this to General Government Subcommittee, please.
Councilor Peliquin?
Yes.
Counselor Steves?
Yes.
Counselor Vandal?
Yes.
Counselor Vecchia?
Yes?
Counselor Carrasco?
Yes.
Counselor Clements?
Yes.
Counselor Estrada?
Yes.
Counselor Moriarty?
Yes.
8 yes.
Thank you. Motion carries. Move on to agenda item number 5, review fiscal year 2016 revenue expense forecast and vote by council to establish budget parameters. Nobody? All right, well, we'll turn it over anyways. See if we end up with any motions.
Council members and members of the school committee and department heads, if you liked health insurance, you're going to love municipal finance. What we've got for you is a PowerPoint presentation. You have copies of it in case you want to take notes. And I'm going to go over there, if that's okay, Mr. Chairman, so I can push buttons.
Sure, and we'll also grab copies. I don't think anybody actually has any.
Okay, so I'm going to hope that the next button I push moves the slide. Don't touch it. What? Talk louder. Yes. As soon as I get this adjusted. There we go. Left and right goes up and down. Okay, great. So, oh, you're going to hand those out? Great. Yeah, these are copies of the slide presentation in case anybody wants to take notes. And if any of you have insomnia, if this doesn't cure it, it's not curable. Read this later. Or have fun with the spreadsheet. It's even more fun. Okay, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
Okay. So, this is the fiscal 16, the budget year that we're about to start, revenue expense forecast. This is not a budget. This is a projection. This is an illustration. Or, as I like to do, paraphrasing the ghost of Christmases to come, this is not a prediction of what will be, but rather what might be. What might be is entirely a policy choice of the council, and of course, in collaboration with the school committee, superintendent, and the department heads. This is an illustration, the spreadsheet, and the numbers I'm going to extract here, of a business-as-usual budget. In other words, all the services we offered our citizens last year, we'll offer again next year. Next year being July 1, 2015 to June 30, 2016, or fiscal 16 as we know it. This is a trial, if you will, to allow the council and the school committee to see the effect of different assumptions you might want to make. And then when you make those assumptions and you understand what that effect is, then you can tell me, the department heads, the superintendent, what budget you'd like to have. You can give us some instructions, but you can do that from a point of view of being informed exactly what those implications are. So this is a beginning point. This is a place to stand so that you can then tell us what you'd like. So, let's get right into it. Revenues. First, the illustration assumes that we levy the taxes that the law allows us to levy. What are those? Prop 2.5 allows us to increase the levy 2.5%. How much is that? It's $871,846 more than the current fiscal year, or a total of $18,915,131. You may decide you don't want to levy all those taxes. This is what you're allowed to do. New growth, which is new tax revenue derived from new construction, is estimated currently by the Assessors Department at $208,000. Now that's going to vary a little bit over time in terms of what it actually ends up, but that's our best estimate as of tonight. And the third component in the property levy are any Prop 2.5 overrides, and you did one some time ago for Bay Path. It was a debt exclusion, and that debt exclusion will go to $222,708, or $78,000 more than last year. So the total amount of new taxes you can raise, if you want to raise all of them, is $924,287 more than last year. Cherry sheet receipts. This is money we get from the state, as you know. There's two big components to it. It's lots of lines. There's a green sheet that says where we get money. There's a pink sheet that says who we send money to. And the whole thing over time has become known as the cherry sheet. It's named for the red one. I don't know why. We should have called it the green sheet, but we call it the cherry sheet. Chapter 70 aid, we're predicting will probably increase. Why are we predicting that? Because we're hearing from our legislators and from the MMA meeting in Boston a couple weeks ago that it's likely that Chapter 78 is going to increase. It is also likely that unrestricted general government aid, which is everything else we get, is going to decrease. You all know that the state is talking about a deficit. It's a different number every day. I hear 300 million, I hear 700 million. It's a moving target. So we don't really know what it is, but we do know the state has a substantial deficit. Usually in years when the state has a deficit, they decrease unrestricted general government aid. So we're predicting a 5% decrease. That's a loss of $156,000 in revenue that ordinarily would go up. Chapter 70 aid almost always invariably increases because of the state's commitment to education, so we're predicting a modest increase. Were those things to be true, that would mean the cherry sheet would go up about $225,000. Okay? Free cash. We have predicted, or we have forecasted, a $117,000 reduction. The reason for that is because free cash is what's called a non-cyclical revenue. It does not repeat necessarily every year. Some years it's high, some years it's low. Seen towns where they had negative free cash numbers. Free cash is nothing more than the difference between what you budget and what you spent and revenue that you predicted at a certain level but came in higher or lower. And when it all washes out in balances, that's free cash. That's the status of the checkbook at the end of the year when we close. So, because that is a non-cyclical, and we don't know what it's going to be, we should not be relying on $1 million of its use every year to balance this budget, because we know these operating expenses are not going to go down. They're only going to go up. So using a non-recurring revenue to support a recurring expense is extraordinarily bad municipal finance. Now, I can't cure the problem in 1 year. I can't take $1 million out of the revenue side. The budget wouldn't balance. But we can start. And so this year we took 10% of it out, $117,000. That's a pretty dramatic move. Proper use of free cash is for non-recurring expenses, like capital expenses that happen once every few years, OPEB, other post-employment benefits, you all know what that is, retiree health insurance, and pension liability. That's what we should be using our free cash for, not the budget. We got a whole bunch of little miscellaneous sources, about 50,000, that's level forecasted. Local receipts. Local receipts is all the money that we take in from a vast variety of lines. There's literally hundreds of them. It's all the permit fees, licenses, and things like that. Motor vehicle excise is the single biggest category. We've got some unusual ones in Southbridge, those landfill fees. So here's what we're predicting. We think motor vehicle excise is going to go up a couple percent because all the new car sales numbers that we're hearing are indicating that people are buying new cars. Landfill royalty, again, is a non-cyclical revenue. Right now, the landfill is scheduled to close in 7 years. In 7 years, the $2 million a year that we use out of landfill receipts to balance this budget are gone. Let me say that again. In 7 years, the $2 million that we use each year to balance the town's budget is gone. We have to stop relying on that revenue source well in anticipation of when it's going to end. If you don't, then 7 years from now, whoever's standing up here talking to you is going to say, I'm awfully sorry, but we failed to predict this purely predictable event, And now our budget must be cut astronomically, $2 million, because we don't have the money anymore. We've got to do better than that. So, this year I took $50,000 out of what you ordinarily use. I cut it $50,000 deliberately. Now, we're still going to get the money, but it's going to flow into free cash, and it's going to be available to use for OPEB, pension liability, and capital spending. By the way, you didn't have a capital budget last year. I'm not sure everybody's aware of that. That's like saying in your home, I'm going to buy my groceries, but I'm not going to fix my broken roof. I'm not going to fix the hole in my driveway. I'm not going to put new tires on my car. Those are all large expenses, capital expenses. We didn't do a capital budget last year. So that means we didn't replace trucks, roads, all the sorts of capital things that towns do. Towns do capital spending every year. We didn't. We can't keep doing that because those expenses that we don't pay for, bridges, roads, trucks, plows, all that stuff, is just going to get more expensive. You can't escape it. It just gets more expensive. And there's lots of capital things in the school department as well that we didn't do, and we can't keep postponing it. So I'm deliberately taking $160,000 out of the operating budget revenue that you used last year and letting it flow into free cash so you'll have it for capital expenses the year after next. It's a procedure that you need to engage in every year for the next 6 or 7 years, so when that landfill closes and you don't have the $2 million, you're not dependent upon it. And by the way, your chief financial officer, who knows all these numbers and the history of the town's finances a great deal better than I do, has been warning about this for a couple of years now. We need to start making this step. It's going to be hard. It's going to be very hard, because taking $2 million out of our operating budget over the course of 6 or 7 years is very difficult. And if you want a tax cut on top of that, it's going to be really difficult. But this is something you've got to do. Landfill reimbursement, that's $590,000 you get a year for a variety of things. Commercial drive reimbursement, that has to do with compensing the town for construction of that road. And then there's a vast variety of other local receipts. Those are all your permit fees and whatnot. And we're predicting those will go up modestly, about $48,000. So total local receipts, when you take those red deducts and you take the black increases, we think that local receipts overall will go up about $27,000. That'll be new revenue you'll have to use. Transfers from available revenues. These are monies that come out of other places and get transferred into the general fund. The Armory debt service, we paid for that, and the state gives us back some money each year. That revenue is only around for, Karen, help me, a couple more years, 3 more? 2 or 3. So 2 or 3 years from now, that $55,000 a year is gone. We need to be preparing for that. Commercial drive reimbursement, that's $280,000. Again, that's money we get for constructing commercial drive. Now, once the money's gone, the cost is gone, also theoretically, except the replacement of it when it wears out, and it's got to get replaced. Septic loan, that's a small revolving loan program we do for homeowners for septic systems. And the Millennium debt service. You all know the Millennium Power Generating Plant just over the line in Charlton. They pay us a lot of money every year for a variety of reasons, and that, fortunately, is cyclical money. That goes on, and it's perfectly reasonable to count it as a revenue in the budget. We get a little bit of money on debt service for 115 Marcy Street. The cable system gives us money to pay for the cost of all sorts of overhead for its employees and operation. That's $127,000. That'll probably go up a couple percent. All the other categories, a whole bunch of small ones, we think will go up a little bit. So the total increase in transfer monies from other sources, we think will go up about $47,000. We have a water sewer enterprise fund. I think you all know that. It means the water and the sewer department are self-sufficient. They have their cost of operations plus the depreciation and capital has to equal what we collect in rate. They make transfers to the general fund because we budget things in the general fund, health insurance, stuff like that, which is not in the enterprise fund, so they have to reimburse the general fund. We think both of those will go up about 2%, and that's a total of about $22,000 in new revenue toward the general government budget. So, here's the summary. If you want to raise all the taxes, you can. That's $924,000. Cherry sheet, we think, will bring in about $225,000. Free cash, I'm saying we need to decrease it $117,000. Other sources, nothing. Local receipts up $27,000. Transfers up $47,000. Enterprise fund transfers up $22,000. Total new revenue available to balance the budget for fiscal 16, $1,130,421. However, a number of councilors have expressed the thought that perhaps we should try to not levy all the taxes that we can. And so, again, and this is just a trial, this is an illustration, this is what we could do, but it isn't necessarily what you want to have done. But I said, what would a 1% reduction in tax revenue look like? Well, if we raise the maximum, it would be $19 million. So if we took 1% out, that's $191,000 we have to take back out. That's net of the Bay Path debt exclusion, because we have to raise that debt exclusion money. There's no choice. So if we took out 1%, $191,000, then our $1,130,000 that's available, or was available, goes down by $191,000, a 1% tax cut, and that leaves us $939,000 with which to balance the fiscal 16 budget. That's a pretty daunting task, but there it is. So let's talk about expenses. What do we think is going to happen with expenses? And by the way, the folks that put this together, your revenue officers, Will Cornier, Mindy, Karen, CFO, treasurer collector, chief assessor, and myself, we all worked on this collectively in order to put this best guesstimate together. And we did a lot of arm wrestling, because sometimes one of us would think a revenue should be a little higher or a little lower. And so we did the work over the course of 2 long meetings to where we got to where the 4 of us are representing to you. We think these revenue estimates are the best work we can do at the current time. That's important, because I want you to know that your experts agree these are the best numbers we can do currently. We have cherry sheet offsets. Those are things that come to us on the cherry sheet, and they're reserved for direct expenditure. We think those will go up a little bit, a couple $1,000 increase. Snow and ice deficit. We have been budgeting $200,000 in the DPW budget and $200,000 off the DPW budget. And then when you run over the DPW $200,000 every year, we then go get the $200,000 and spend it. That's a silly way to budget, because we know we're going to spend the $400,000. We've historically spent that for a long, long time now. So what I'm proposing to do is to simply put the $400,000 in the DPW budget, period. It's no impact to spending. It's the exact same number, 200 here plus 200 there, or 400 in one place. It's just better budgeting, that's all it is. The cherry sheet continued. Now, these are monies that we send somewhere else. This is the pink sheet component of the cherry sheet. So, school choice, we think will be level. We don't know for sure for a while yet, so we're just plugging the number at the same as it was this year for now. And hopefully it's not going to change. We don't know. Charter school assessment, $26,000. We're predicting it can go up a couple percent, because it can go up a couple percent. Other charges, which are a whole variety of small things, mosquito districts and all sorts of stuff. We think that will go up a couple of $1,000. So total new cherry sheet charges, $1.4 million, which is about $3,000, $4,000 more than they are now. Not very dramatic. Allowance for abatements and exemptions. Every year we put money aside because we have to give exemptions and abatements to the blind, the elderly, well, what am I missing? Blind, elderly, veterans. Senior tax rebate program. Right. So we have to put money aside as an offset to the taxes we won't collect or that we'll have to give back. This is a reval year. It's that triennial reval year coming up in 16, so we have to increase it. It's usually 200. We're saying we should probably bump it up a little to 2.25. That's a $25,000 increase. General government operating budget. This is what I hear called the town budget, but I don't call it the town budget because the town budget is the general government and the school. It's not like the town is the town and the school's not part of the town. We're all part of the town. So normally you think of it in two different ways, general government and education. You don't call it town, it's all town. So the general government operating budget, which is fire, police, DPW, town hall, library, council on aging, all that, we're saying, what if it went up 2%? That would probably be about enough to do a business as usual budget, roughly. So we increased it that, and we put the $200,000 for snow and ice in there. So that turns out to be a $446,000 increase. $200 of that is not a real increase, it's just moving it from another place. So it's about a $226,000 increase. That's what a 2% increase to the general government budget is, $226,000, okay? Keep that number in mind. Our insurances, retirement, et cetera, we already have the number from our own retirement board certified by PERAC, and we know that's a good number. Unfortunately, it went up by quite a bit, $141,000. That's the nature of pensions right now, folks. They're going up. Employee group health and life, if everything we talked about earlier tonight pans out, then we won't have to spend any more on employee health insurance. It'll be level. That'll be a welcome relief. Last year, I think we had an 8% increase. So this year, we might predict that it won't increase, which is very good news because it's actually going to go down and we're going to share that if all goes as we hope. I'm predicting property casualty will stay level. I'm going to competitively bid your property casualty insurance. I'm told it has not been competitively bid in an unknown but long time. And so I'm very optimistic we can save some money there. Generally speaking, when you don't bid it in a long time, the carrier just keeps increasing your premium because you're not paying attention. And then when you bid it competitively, they sharpen the pencil. When you don't do it for a long time, generally you get some pretty good return when you finally do it. I'm not predicting a decrease, I'm just leveling it, but I'm hoping for a decrease. Same with workers' comp, exact same thing. Unemployment. I'm going to come back and talk about this one because we're budgeting it at 215, but something really extraordinary and very bad is going on, and I don't know what, but I'm going to show you some slides in a minute. Total new insurance costs, we're predicting $6.6 million, which is a $141,000 increase over the current year. Debt service goes up every year. We're saying 2.5, maybe a little different. We're not 100% sure, but we're putting a margin in for it right now, $65,000. Bay Path Regional School. Again, it's allowed to go up 2.5%. The budget goes up 2.5. What each individual community gets for an increase is not equal to 2.5. It's mandated by a couple factors, the biggest of which is how many students do you send there. So that's not a number we're probably going to know for a couple of months yet, but in order to bracket the likelihood that it will go up, we've hit it with 2%. Could be more, could be less. Time will tell. But we want to budget something for that margin. Bay Path Capital is a known number. It is going to go up $78,562. That's already been voted and approved in the past by the voters. Total new Bay Path budget, we're predicting $1.1 million or $96,198 more than the current fiscal year. The education budget, I did with it the same thing that I did with the general government budget. I increased it by 2%. Just as a test, that's $504,000. This is not saying that's what your budget should be. It's not saying it's not what your budget shouldn't be. It's just an illustration to give you a rough idea. If it was 2%, how does it fit with all these revenues we've projected? So, the new expense summary. The cherry sheet offsets, $2,485 higher than last year. Cherry sheet charges, $3,000 higher. Abatements, $25,000 higher. General government budget, $446,000 higher. Snow and ice reserve goes down $200 because remember those offset each other. The general government budget really is up $226. Insurance is up $141, debt up $65,000. Bay Path Regional up 96, Southbridge School Department 504. Total new FY16 expense, $1,085,048 projected. So you compare that to what we got. We predicted $50,716,000 in revenue, $50,862,000 in spending. That would equal a deficit of $145,000. So, were all these things to happen as they're shown here, we would not have a balanced budget yet. We would have to go in and cut $145,000 out of this budget. So, this gives you a place to stand as you deliberate what do you want to see. So what you see is, if you want a higher budget, then obviously we're going to have to come up with more money somehow. If you want a tax cut, less revenue, then we're going to have to cut on the spending side. It's a raise the bridge, lower the river thing. Simple as that. Now, I know there's a few questions because some people have been asking about it, so I wanted to review what the major assumptions are and talk about a couple things I noticed. Major assumptions. Number one, we will reduce the tax levy, what we could otherwise raise, by 1%. If you don't want to do that, there's $190,000 back on the revenue side, and we're more than balanced. Okay? Chapter 78 will increase 2%. It may not. It may increase more, it may increase less, but that's a major moving part in this. All of the cherry sheet A will decrease 5%. That's a major assumption. Free cash, we have to reduce it. Start reducing our reliance on it in landfill royalties, so both of those need to go down. Indirect offsets will just be adjusted for inflation. I'm assuming those are accurate. I don't know. I hear differing things. These are monies that come from water sewer for a piece of the manager's salary, a piece of the treasurer's salary, for insurances, for expenses, for health insurance, for a whole variety of scheduled things, and I haven't looked at those yet. Assuming they're accurate, they go up 2%, that's a major assumption. Another assumption is that we will reduce taxes, but we will not reduce services. So this is a level services budget that still provides for a 1%, $190,000 tax cut. That's a big assumption in here that hopefully we can do. The overlay should increase due to the reval year. Town and school budgets will increase 2%. Town employee or general government employee salary increase of 2.5% is in that budget I illustrated, because fire and police already have a 2.5%, those two unions, and we want to maintain parity. I would suggest to you it is an extraordinarily bad and dangerous precedent to say to one group of employees, you will get this COLA, and to another group, you will get that COLA. That leads to the formation of new unions. And if anybody wants to know the reality of that, see me after the meeting and I'll tell you the story in Easton and Foxborough of how two brand new unions got formed just because of this, non-parity in wages. It happens all the time. Health insurance savings will be substantial, but will be used to increase the town contributory share. So in other words, we're going to save a lot of money, but we're not going to get it. We're going to give it back. That's a big assumption in this. Quinn bill education incentives will be given to police officers. They are funded in this theoretical budget. Now, we have not yet agreed we're going to do that, but I'm telling you, it's in this assumed budget. That's an assumption. If you say, we don't want you to do that, then that's $45,000 that can come out of that budget. That's the cost to do it. The reason I'm putting in it is because of the council's goal, which is to stop losing police officers. I spoke to you early this evening. The reason we're losing employees is primarily health insurance. The other big reason is we don't do Quinn, and everybody around us does. And finally, this budget assumes that there will not be any employee reductions, i.e. no layoffs. We hope. Now, I spoke to you earlier about school unemployment costs. These costs are excessive. I don't know what's going on, but we need to talk about it, and we need to find out why. In the last 3 fiscal years, general government has spent $39,000 in unemployment. The school has spent $680,000. That is an astronomical figure. I don't know why, but we need to figure that out. So far this year, The town has spent $382. The school has spent $98,000. This is hemorrhaging. This has got to be understood, and we've got to correct this. At the current rate of expending, we will expend $200,000 in unemployment costs. I don't know why we're doing that, but we've got to figure it out. I got a couple of slides here because I thought you should have this information because you'd ask. So we prepared some of this just this afternoon. In fiscal 16, we have 26.2 payrolls. We never have exactly 26. Well, actually you do. Every fourth or fifth year you have 26. Most of the time you have 26 point something because a fiscal year and a calendar year are not the exact same thing. So you always get 26 pay periods and a little bit, and then June 30th occurs. Unfortunately, this year we got 26.2, which is usually the worst you ever get, and that's costing us $32,000, which has got nothing to do with the budget. It's just the fact that we got 1/10 of an additional payroll next year. It's just the way the calendar sets up. We have, on the general government side, 4 vacant positions. I have put a hiring freeze on with respect to those 4 positions until I hear back from the council what your wishes are. Those 4 positions and the cost associated with them, straight pay, is on that chart. I am not suggesting to you that I would recommend to you nor condone the elimination of staff positions. In my professional judgment, you do not have a department which is overstaffed. You don't have one. What I am saying to you is that if it is necessary to reduce the general government budget because of the instructions you give me, I would rather sacrifice vacant positions than lay people off. A, because of the human cost, and B, because for every employee you lay off, you have to lay off another half employee to pay the unemployment for the first one. And for the half that you lay off to cover the first, you have to lay off another quarter to cover the half. And so it becomes an exercise in chasing your tail when you decide to cut budgets by layoffs. It's a real bad thing to get into. Now, 2 years later, well, actually not now. I think it's only 30 weeks right now because Congress hasn't authorized the extension. So 30 weeks later, you know, all those people you cut to pay the unemployment on the first group, you're able to hire them back. You can't hire back the first group, but you can hire back the ones you cut to pay the first group. But you can't do that for 30 weeks, most of the fiscal year. And since we don't tend to hire people back, you know, 9/10 of the way through the fiscal year, generally when you cut them for the year, for the fiscal year. It's a real bad exercise to get into. But, and so for that reason, if I have to reduce the budget due to council instructions, I would sacrifice vacant positions first. That's known as cutting by attrition, as you know. So those 4 positions, $182,000. We use a 30% fringe multiplier. That's health insurance, pensions, all that stuff. That's another 54. So if I cut those 4 positions, that's $250,000 savings that the town could realize. So if the council says to me, we want you to reduce this budget, or we don't want as much taxes raised, or whatever it is you say, that's probably the very first place I'm going to go. Unless you tell me, cut the budget, but don't cut any jobs. Okay, I'll go somewhere else. I know it's going to be asked, what is that 2.5% cost of living adjustment for all the general government employees cost? I don't know the school number. I do know the general government number. It's about $207,000. So in that budget, if the council were to say, no one's getting a raise this year, about half that number has to stay because it's a bargained, negotiated number for police and fire. You can't not do it. But you could cut about 100. I tell you again, that would be, in my opinion, an extraordinarily bad idea. But I put it up here so you will have the information. And that is it.
Questions and comments? Councilor Vecchia.
I'll wait till the town manager comes back here. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I have some questions for the town manager. To begin with, on our master sheet, Mr. Town Manager, property 2.5 base increase, you want to increase from 2015 from 18 million to almost 19 million, which is $871,000 tax, which is $871,000 tax increase, okay? You're going to get that money from real estate taxes.
Correct.
All right. Rule of thumb as last year, for every 1% it's 170,000. It might have changed a little bit. So that's a 5% tax increase to the taxpayers, okay? You're reducing it 1% below with that reduction, so that's a 4% tax increase, okay? But you're $145,000 short, all right? Last year's budget was almost $50 million. Now you want an additionally $1 million, okay? What I had stated, we had a petition, we had a pledge, which we said, we as Southbridge Town Councilors pledge to be more stringent in protection of the taxpayers by lowering each and every budget 2016 by at least 1%. We state the following reasons for this action. Taxpayers need relief due to increase in water and sewer rates. Water and sewer rates are sky high. Landfill monies will soon expire. Stagnant commercial tax base, increase in out-of-school placement. Now, if you were to reduce the budget 1%, it would go from $49,777 to $49,770,000. You reduce it $500,000, the budget would be $49,250,000 per our petition. You got a budget of $50,862,704, plus you're short $146,000. So you're over $1.5 million that we want to spend. You've got all these 2% in here, and I'm not for this budget at all. I'm not want to tell the taxpayers that they're going to have a 5% tax increase based on this. Last year in the paper, average tax bill went up $158. I don't want to see the average tax bill go up this December $158, okay? So I'm not for that. I'll have other things to say, but I'm done at this time. So let the other people talk. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments?
You're not talking?
Councilor Steves?
Actually, when I was reading through the paperwork that you put in the packet for the week, that was the first thing that jumped out at me, too. And I wasn't one of the ones who signed that letter. But it does bother me that this does specifically, I mean, we haven't taxed at the levy limit in years. And whether or not we should is an issue that we really probably should debate, but we have not. So in fact, this is not a 1% cut at all, to summarize what Councilor Vecchia just said.
Can I just say my thing? He states this.
I know, I heard him.
Councilor Vecchia, at the moment, Councilor Steves has the floor.
I heard him. At the moment, I've got so many notes here on this page that I honestly don't even know where to start with all the questions I could possibly ask you. Like one of the questions that occurs to me, we're talking about not having other, you read off a couple of sources of income, and one of the things that jumped out at me was, when do we start seeing money, for example, from Wells and the other building sales? How do we deal with that?
When do we get one, I'm sorry?
The money from the sale of Wells and some of the other buildings. How does that get accounted for in the budget? And also,
the biggest revenue you get will be the sales of the Wells School. I think it was $1.2 million was the sale price. You probably won't see that for at least another 18 months because what they told us was that they thought it would take at least 2 years to line up their financing. It's all state and federal grant money. And once they got it lined up, they would be in a position to make the payment. So they have not done that yet, and we've been chasing them for months now, trying to get them to sign a purchase and sale agreement, and they're resisting us. So I will tell you candidly, don't count on seeing the money anytime soon, because I think you're still at least 18 months away. At that point, you get the money.
So in technicality, we actually still own the building then?
So what?
So we still own that building?
So we still own the building, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Because I'm not going to get into that right now, but I wasn't really thrilled with the idea of selling the building in the first place. Anyway, I'll let somebody else go while I dig out what other questions I want to ask, because I got a bunch of them.
All set at the moment? For the moment. Councilor Carrasco?
Yeah, Councilor Steves mentions the sales of the buildings, but if my memory recalls, that money was supposed to be used for offset of the building of our new school. So originally, that's how it was sold to the public, and that's how the school was built, that when we sold these 5 buildings, though we're going to sell them at a cheap price, whatever it was, that money was going to go pay for the new school. And I see here that, I don't know what this is my question to you, Mr. Town Manager, through the chair, is that there's a debt service of about 10.8 thousand coming from 115 Marcy Street. I understand that building has been sold. That money shouldn't be ours. That, if we've made the promise to the citizens that should go to paying the bill of that school, we shouldn't be including that in any budget. We should be paying what has been said. So I'm not sure I know.
That's exactly what it's doing. The debt service to pay for the new school is in the debt service budget, and this money from the sale of Marcy Street comes into the budget and goes toward the bottom line to pay that.
Okay, because it was
That's
a little
exactly what
confusing.
it's doing.
Okay, great. Another question that I have is, again, I just started reviewing, and I do have a lot of notes also, but almost every budget has been increased. And yes, I was one of those that said was going to sign and going to cut the budget 1%. I don't understand how that message wasn't clearly received. We're going to present a budget, Mr. Town Manager, that portrays a 1% cut is not accurate when you're actually still raising it to the full capacity. Our citizens are going to be taxed, and unfortunately, I have a father that's disabled. He's on Social Security. They got a 1.7 increase. So guess who's going to be paying this? It's our seniors. It's the people that are still owning houses in town. This is, unfortunately, a lot of our middle class has left for various reasons, whether it's school choice, poor services, however we want to look at it. And for a lot of our departments, no offense to none of them, but they don't feel none of these increases. None of them, or some of them, better said, live in town. So their budgets can increase, but they're not feeling the brunt. Some of them take cars home, so they don't pay car insurance to come to work. They don't pay gas to come to work. So there's a lot of different issues that I have with this budget, because there's a lot of increase, and the people that suffer most, it's our citizens. I won't support this.
Councilor Steves?
Thanks again. One of the other things I noticed when you were listening was seats. You didn't mention Chapter 90. Do we have any idea how much we're likely to get next year?
How much what?
Chapter 90?
Chapter 90 is not in this budget because it comes in for a specific purpose, road repair, and it goes back out for road repair. So we don't put it in here. It's all outside the budget.
And maybe this is a neophyte question.
As a practical matter, though, I think we're expecting about $750,000, correct? Yeah.
Okay, that's good. And this may be a neophyte question, but if free cash is simply the money that we had in the budget for this year that we didn't expend, why doesn't it make sense to use it as a budgetary item for next year, since it's money that we already have anyway?
There's two reasons. Free cash, again, is the difference between when you estimate your revenues, and we have to estimate revenue conservatively, because we can be wrong in the estimate in that we collect more, but we cannot be wrong legally in that we collect less. We cannot have a cash deficit. That's unlawful for a city or town to have.
Yeah, I get that.
So we always estimate low, we always collect more. That more, plus whatever you budget and don't spend, and the departments turn back money every year, those two things, plus a whole bunch of miscellaneous stuff, goes to free cash. But by definition, free cash is therefore very hard to predict, essentially impossible to predict, and it varies from year to year. So to treat it as if it's an annual, predictable, recurring revenue and putting into the operating budget is very dangerous.
Okay. And speaking of annual recurring revenue, you made a point, obviously, about the, and I remember we talked about the issue about wanting to wean ourselves off of the Casella money, but you put in specific, you basically identified the Millennium money as recurring. How is that any different from our Casella royalties?
It's no different from property tax revenue because a lot of it is in lieu of property tax. Some of it's to pay for specific services that they receive. It's all part of a contract that was generated that has no end. It goes on as long as Millennium's around. Now, if Millennium were to go out of business for some reason, then probably that money would stop. But nobody is predicting that outcome as opposed to the landfill, which we know, in point of fact, the cells will be filled in 7 years.
Yeah.
It will close unless you allow it to expand.
Right.
So to rely on that landfill royalty money to fund the operating budget is also very dangerous.
Yeah, I get that. Okay.
So one thing you need to be aware of, you're using about $3 million a year between landfill royalty money, which is going to end in 7 years, or 6 years after this budget, and $1 million in free cash. So you've got $3 million in this budget that you really need to get out of it. So if you're talking about reducing, now in a tax cut, when you say you want a tax reduction, you have to define that, what it is, because there's a lot of ways you can define that. So you, the council, need to define that. So if you're simultaneously trying to get some of that $3 million out of the budget and reduce taxes, it's doable. It's mathematics. You tell me what it is, I'll accomplish it. But I have to tell you back honestly what the implications of that are. The whole point of this isn't to say, this is my budget.
Right.
This isn't my budget. This is just an illustration. The whole point of this is to say, assuming these things happen the way they're pictured, we'd have a business as usual situation, more or less. But if you change these assumptions, I can tell you relatively, for every assumption you want to change, what is the implication? How much can you cut from this revenue picture before you hit layoff? How much of the expenses can you cut before we can't do business as usual? We have to start reducing services. This basically replicates service, but I've heard councilors say that you don't support this. That's fine, that's great. That tells me something. Now, I need more, lest we play what I lovingly call with my wife the restaurant game, which is, where do you want to go out to eat, hon? I don't care, anywhere you want to go. Okay, let's go here. No, I don't want to go there. Well, let's go here. No, I don't want to go there. I need more than this doesn't work. I need what does work. And when you tell me what works for you, what you want, then the department heads and I can go construct that budget. So I'm going to need more than this doesn't work. I'm beginning to get that. And by the way, I didn't come in here tonight thinking this is going to work. I'd like to think I got a little more brains than that.
Yeah.
But I don't really know. I've heard from individual councilors about what you're thinking, but unfortunately, a town manager cannot respond to 9 individual people. The council has to work as a body to decide what it wants to issue as instructions to your managers. So we are here together tonight, and we are saying to you, what would you like us to do? Give us a mission, and we'll accomplish it.
I'll say Councilor Steves.
For the moment.
Okay, if Councilor Vecchia.
What we want you to do, you had a $50 million budget last year, we want you to cut it $500,000 instead of increasing it $1 million, okay? That's what we asked for you to do. And this $871,000 will increase the taxes 5%. You're telling us about a 1% deduction. It's a 1% deduction from 5% increase, so it's a 4% increase. We don't want an increase. We don't want no new taxes. In fact, we'd like to see a decrease, okay? Now, about free cash, I'd like to explain about free cash. Free cash shouldn't even be used here because it should be left for a rainy day fund because it's our savings. we should, if we have a $50 million budget, we should have at least 20%, or at least 10%, $5 million in free cash not touched at all. We really should have 10 million, just in case something happens and we have a big problem, like when the landfill cuts. But I could talk all night. What do I want? I want to cut the budget 1%. It was a $50 million budget, so I like to make the budget $49,500,000, not $50,862,000. It's 1.5 over. You're giving everybody 2% increases, and that's how I feel about it. Thank you very much.
Councilor Clements.
I feel similar. I would like to see the 1%. I know that's very difficult in times when everything's going up, and over the past years, we've, I think, been very mindful of the fact that everything seems to increase. But we keep hearing from the citizens that they want less taxes, they want less budget, while things, again, unemployment, various things have gone up astronomically. Obviously, you've given us somewhat of an out. I mean, there are some positions that aren't being filled, which means if we don't fill them, they're still there. We don't fill them, they are, they're not costing us at this point. We're still keeping the services as what we are doing. It may not be the most optimal situation, but therein lies $236,900 if we do not fill those positions. The 2% or 2.5% general overage, while I prefer not to necessarily discuss it all here, I'm going to say a few things. The previous manager, over the last, in the time that I've been here, almost 6 years now, there was a lot of shuffling that went on. There was shuffling internally in the town hall, for instance. They went from union to non-union. There was a lot of wage shuffling in order to make things equal, equitable. Didn't want to make people who weren't union anymore feel that they weren't getting the increases that the union people were getting. We keep hearing that. And there were many years when people didn't get a raise. And my recollection is that we gave those raises. We changed position titles. We increased salaries and gave raises. Having said that, in years when many, many companies, as most of you know out there, are not giving raises at all, I think it would be prudent of us to, while we may have negotiated with union, unfortunately, and we can say no sometimes, by the way, guys. You know, you can say no to the union. Sorry. But that's the way life is sometimes. Not everybody's getting a raise, and perhaps this is the year that that's going to happen, because I know we have given raises in the past few years, 2%, 2 to 3% in that range, for non-union or for the rest of them. And while most of our employees, I believe, are union, with negotiation powers, it's life right now, and we are looking at the taxpayers, as everybody keeps saying. I generally don't say a whole lot about this type of thing. It's not the fun subject to talk about. We usually have to cut services. I was willing to sit up here and say, well, let's cut some positions. You make great points, and I agree with you. When you cut positions, you have to give benefits. You have to increase that $680,000 worth of unemployment to $700,000 or $800,000. We don't want to do that. Let's try to keep the services level as to where we're at, but let's get this budget down some. I'm totally in favor of doing that, and I have no problem with hanging on to the, you know, we've done this in the past where we haven't hired. It's not great. Do we need more fire and police and service laborers? Maybe the park's not going to get cleaned up. Maybe your call's not going to get answered. But you can't have it both ways. The citizens have to realize we either save some money somewhere and we make our people work a little tighter, be a little more efficient in what they do, or we're going to raise the taxes. You can't have it both ways. So I'm all for looking at those specific areas. That brings you over $300,000 right there. I mean, that brings us really close to what we're talking about. And I'm sure there's some more wiggle room in there somewhere if we look hard enough. Tighten up the budgets, tighten up the belts a little bit more. But it's good. We appreciate that. This is probably the first time I've ever seen this come forward this early, and with time for us to really think about it and probably get a lot of phone calls, because people won't want to hear what we said. You know, they won't want to understand what we said tonight, whether it's this, whether it's the insurance. It's been quite an eye-opening, ear-opening experience tonight. But I appreciate all the effort that's gone into it, and I look forward to the challenges that we face to reduce these taxes and to make things better for the whole community, the entire community, not just a few. Thank you.
Quick clarifying question for myself. Slides 11 and 12, revenue forecast continued. Slide 11, under local receipts, we have commercial drive reimbursement. And then on the next slide, slide 12, under transfers from available revenues, we again have commercial drive reimbursement. Can you just clarify as to why we have it in there in two different slides?
No, actually, I can't, but I know someone who can. Karen? Know your limits.
It actually is in two pieces because of a timing issue. The total of the two come up to the total debt for the roadway for the year. So it's over $400,000.
And how long, if you know offhand, how long will we be paying debt on that roadway?
I believe it was a 20-year, and we're probably in maybe the third or fourth year. It's actually what it is, the money will come in, I believe it's May, before we vote the budget. A piece of it is used for the fiscal year that we're in, and a piece of it is used for the next fiscal year. That's why it's divided like that.
Okay, thank you. And the only other question I have for the manager, we've talked, this is something that last year, I forget if Mr. Clark was here, if it was Bob Reed, or if it was yourself, but either way, when we first kind of got that information that the landfill was going to be closing up shop a little earlier than expected, so that landfill money dries up in 7 years. And whether it's the Irish cynic in me or not, I even wonder if that 7-year number is going to be truthful. Maybe it's shorter. So if we're talking about cutting in 7 years, losing $2 million of revenue, that is, and I'm trying to see, I've written a number of things down here, that comes out to roughly $285,000 a year. So rather than, and if I understood you correctly, you're talking about cutting out essentially 50 grand of that to kind of start moving in the right direction. My problem with that is I'm certainly not an economics guy. I'm not a math guy, an accountant's guy, whatever. It's my wife, and she does that stuff, and that's great. If it wasn't for grading software, I'd probably be screwed.
But bet you're multiplying 50,000 times 7 and you're not coming up with 2 million.
Correct. So to me, we're talking about 50,000. So if my math is correct, that's about 2.5%, ironically enough, of the $2 million.
Right.
Whereas 1 year out of 7 is 14+%.
So if you did 50,000 for 7 years, you'd end up with 350,000 against 2 million.
Yeah, so you'd be another 1.6
right,
short.
When the axe falls in 7 years, you'd have to cut 1.6 million. Right.
So if
Your
my
math is correct.
So if my further math is correct, we're basically talking 1/7 of that 2 million. It comes out to about $140, $140,000 a year.
Right.
So why are we not targeting that kind of number instead of the 50,000?
For a simple reason, because I anticipated that the council would speak in some way tonight about not wanting to raise this tax revenue that you can raise. I anticipated you would say, don't raise all of it, raise half of it, but cut it. You can't do all this. So to simultaneously not raise the tax revenue you can and make a more dramatic move on those landfill royalties means you begin to get rapidly into the large-scale layoff territory. So it's sort of a question of, and let me illustrate. So let's say, for sake of discussion, because I've heard it said, that we wanted to accomplish having no tax increase next year. Okay? That means we'd have to cut the budget $871,846. That's the number. That means zero tax increase. Now, you're still levying the $208,000 of new growth taxes, but that's theoretically being raised from new buildings. So you cut the $871. Now, if you look down on the expense side, you find that the town budget grew $226,000 on netting out the $200 for snow and ice, and you find that the school budget grew $504. So if you take $504 and you take $226, guess what? You're almost at $871. Got to find another $100. So in other words, in order to have no tax increase, and looking at the moving parts here, because some of these parts you can cut and some you can't. You can't cut the insurances below zero. So when you look at the things you can cut on the expense side, there's very few lines. I mean, really, the only couple lines you got is the school operating budget and the town operating budget. So So, in order to have no tax increase, rough and tough, the school budget can't go up a penny and the town budget can't go up a penny. That's the implication of that. Now, you already have 2.5% wage increases in police and fire that have to happen. So you'd have to absorb those 2.5% wage increases. That's about $125,000, split rough and tough between those two departments, and still pull the rest of those budgets down by that same number. And all the expenses that are in budgets that cause those budgets to go up would have to also come down. Things like step increases. An employee goes from their 5th year to their 6th year, they get a step increase. And we've got lots of people getting step increases. You have to grant those because that's the law, but then you'd have to take that money back out somewhere else. So what ends up happening is, of these, and I can't speak to the school budget, but of the $12.7 million town operating budget, somewhere around $1 million of that is expenses, the bulk of it being in the DPW budget. All the rest of it's payroll. And I'm going to suspect the school is about the same. And we're still crunching numbers. I actually want to get on a piece of paper a real detailed analysis of how much expenses are. So when you talk about cutting the kinds of numbers we're talking, I can cut those 4 positions and basically I got to cut another, about another 40,000. And then so I eliminate all the growth and I cut another 40. The school eliminates all their growth and they cut another 60, rough and tough, just on proportionality. But in order to get that number out and absorb those other things, it's going to take a lot more than those 4 positions, as you can see. And so the difference is layoffs. So in other words, in order to achieve a budget that raises no taxes next year, we have to lay people off. There's no getting around that. I'm not going to gild the lily. I'm not going to try to say it with niceties. I'm going to put it out there for you very, very clear. Now, if you're okay with that, I'll do it. Done. That's what you pay me to do. I will do it. But I need you to be sure, before you send me down that road, that that is what you want to have happen. Because you and I both know, because we've all been doing this a long time, you know what's going to happen. I'm going to tell Jim Jones or Lucy Jones, you're going to lose your job on July 1st, and they are going to call you. I'm going to tell the school, you can't raise the school budget. And not just that, you have to cut it. And that means some layoffs. And then they're going to call the school committee, and then they're going to call you. And so what we all need to do here is to not be silly and not fool ourselves about the implications of what we're doing. So, the reason I did this for you was so you can see, when you say, do this, Kevin, I can say to you in an instant, that's what you just said means. Do you mean it? And if you tell me you mean it, my God, I will get it done for you. I promise you I will get it done. Just be sure you mean it.
The only other question or comment I had is not so much a question, it's just a comment. We had earlier the Obamacare piece was referenced, and so I'll equate it as well, not so much Obamacare, but just Congress in general, and compared to what we've done or past councils have done. And we've heard a lot of talk about the water sewer rates going up 15%, and they're going to keep going up. And the reason for that, and it was stated clearly, again, I forget which, if it was an interim or if it was Mr. Clark that was here, and Heather was there, and several counselors. But essentially the problem we had was, for years, town councilors knew that the water and the wastewater treatment plants were falling apart, in just dire need of work, of repairs, of upgrades, of updates. However, for political expediency, each and every year they just kick the can down the road, just as Congress does with every friggin' issue. Every issue. So for me, whether it means re-election or not, is what it is. For me, we have 7 years left You want to talk about a fiscal cliff? We've got 7 years left to overcome this $2 million gap, and I just can't see it making any sense to continue kicking that can down the road, as councils have done year after year after year, because this way they get to go down to Dunkin' Donuts or McDonald's and say, hey, look what I did and what I didn't do, and get reelected. So for me, we need cuts. We need to find, certainly we don't want to cut $2 million over 1 year or 2 years or 3 years. It's going to have to be done over those 7 years plus. Because as difficult as any potential layoffs may be now, by cutting 800 some odd thousand, it sure is a whole lot better than what's going to happen when it's 1.6 million that has to be cut with no real option. So that's all I have, and I've got a growing list. Sure, go ahead.
Let me offer the council two thoughts, and the school committee and department heads, two thoughts that you're not going to like the sound of, but I'm a finance person. That's what I do primarily. That's what I've always done in municipal government, for as long as I can remember. And so I've analyzed your budget incredibly thoroughly and in excruciating detail. I'm going to make two observations for you. Town of Southbridge is living substantially beyond its means. The budget is too big. You cannot afford this school and this town budget. You can't. The reality is, of your $50 million of revenue, $3 million of it is gone in 7 years. It's gone. If you raise taxes the very most you can possibly raise them, your citizens will not accept that. They will not let you do that again. The combination of eliminating some of that $3 million in spending, which is going to end, and which must begin now. You can't get yourself to the edge of the cliff and then push yourselves collectively off in 6 years. You got to start doing it now, and you got to start doing it to the tune of bigger numbers than I'm showing. I agree with you. And the second thing is you can't raise taxes. So you got to do two things simultaneously. You have to reduce reliance on that $3 million. You got to get that down by some material number. 150,000, 160,000 isn't really cutting it. It's a step in the right direction. You haven't done that before, so it's at least moving in the right direction. But you need to do more. Now, if on top of that you also don't increase taxes at all, then you are going to have that very gigantic structural change that you need begin to happen this year. But here's what that means in real terms. Structural change means the reduction of budgets in the town in a dramatic way. It means reduction of personnel, both on the school side and on the town side. There's no getting around that reality. That's the way it has to happen. Now, we can either start doing that in little bits or we can start doing it in larger bits. I would tell you, I don't think it's wise to raise no taxes at all. To have no tax increase, I think, is unwise. At the same time that you're trying to cut 250, 300,000 of that non-recurring 3 million, let's say you try to cut 10%, 300,000, and then you don't raise taxes. That's a net cut of 1.2 million to this illustration.
That's exactly what we did.
Yeah, yeah, and I hear you, and I don't disagree, because I think Apple's right. This budget needs structural change. Structural means big reductions, because you're living on a false revenue base. You can't do this. So I'm very willing to begin that structural change for you, but you can't do it in one fiscal year. This is something that's going to have to take place. But what you got to do, you got a police report out there. I was just talking to the chief today. Here's the chief. Here's the chief. He and I were chatting. You got a police report that came in you had done a year ago. You paid 20 grand for it, chief, right? And the report said you need more cops. That's what the report said. But the reality is, you can't afford more cops. You can't possibly afford more cops. You're going to have less. And you're going to have less firemen. And you're going to have less DPW and potentially less at town hall. That's the only way you're going to achieve structural revenue responsibility. It's the only way you're going to do it. Now, I hate to say this, because, I'm just the interim, I'm gone in a few months, and everybody says, remember that knucklehead Pecos who gave us the bad news that night, and whether you did or you didn't pay any attention to it, your next manager is going to be telling you the same thing. Now, what that unfortunate person, when he or she tells you this, they want to stay here a while because they like to be your manager and they want to do it for a while. So they're going to be a little hesitant to say what I just said. I have the luxury of telling you, right, what it is about. And Apple's right. Now, I'm not saying Apple's right or wrong because of what his goal is, but I am saying if what he's noticed that's driving his goal is that we cannot sustain this rate of spending, that is correct. That is correct. So, I offer you that very sobering thought, that most unwelcome thought. I'm sure in the morning I'm going to get a lot of real rosy thank yous for saying this tonight, but that's the truth. That's the truth. And by the way, any of you who look at these numbers can come to the same conclusion pretty quickly, because if you take the $3 million that isn't going to be there, and you take it out, and then you look at what's left, if you raise taxes to the maximum, which people aren't going to let you do, but if you did that, you can't make up what you took out. You only get $871 in new taxes. You got $3 million in revenue that's non-sustainable. That math don't work. So my recommendation to you is to make a more meaningful cut in those in the $3 million of revenues. Get it up to something better, like $400,000 maybe. Levy some of those taxes. Levy some of them. And I'm still going to have to cut the heck out of this budget, and the school's going to have to cut on their side. I mean, I'm told it's a sharing thing that, if it's $1 million cut, you get your pro rata share, I get my pro rata share. No? I get more. Yeah, okay. Yeah, good. Yeah. I would have been disappointed if you said okay. But that's what we got to do, and that's my suggestion to you. Raise taxes a little bit, cut your over-reliance on these revenues, and I will do the unpleasant task with the department heads that needs to be done.
All set. I have Councilor Carrasco, then Councilor Vecchia.
I'll let Councilor Vecchia go because he's been raising his hand. It's nonstop.
To begin with, we shouldn't raise taxes at all. All right? So when you say raise taxes a little bit, I stated that we should give a 1% cut, that we should be lowering taxes. If we lowered last year's budget $500,000, okay, $170,000 per, the taxes will go down 2-3%. All right? If we stick to our guns and say, lower this budget, last year's budget, $500,000, and that also plays into the money that we need, okay? Meaning the budget last year was $49,777,000. We reduce it $500,000, okay? That takes a cut into the $3 million that you're talking about. But the people's taxes will go down a couple percent. But under no circumstances do I want to see the taxes raised at all, okay? And I think we got enough councilors up here that don't want to raise taxes at all. We have to do whatever we have to do to make sure we don't raise taxes. Thank you.
Ms. Quinney?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The first question I have through you to Mr. Pecos is, you said that Chapter 9 is specific for road repair and therefore it wasn't considered in this layout because it has a specific purpose and only to be used for that purpose. Is that not exactly the case for Chapter 70?
No, Chapter 70, as you probably know, is regarded as a general fund revenue. It's not earmarked for schools.
That is shocking.
Now, some towns make political decisions about that. I leave that to your discretion. You tell me what your political decision is. I'm just telling you what the law provides, that's all.
Okay, I won't argue that point at this moment. However, net school spending is a mandated amount of money that is required by the state for municipalities to expend to the schools. If that net school spending amount exceeds a 1% decrease in the budget, it would be illegal for the municipality to then cut that budget. Is that correct?
Well, the number that you really have to pay attention to is called minimum effort required, MER. And I don't know what MER is. We'd have to go through the 34-step formula in order to determine that. But you are quite correct. You are required to make a certain minimum effort, which is a derivative of NSS, net school spending, as it flows through the big giant formula. And when you get to net minimum effort required, that's the number you must budget. And you cannot budget any less, whatever that number is. I have no idea if you're above NSS, below NSS, I don't know where you are. But whatever it is, you are right, that is the minimum. And if the council's instructions require a cut, which is in excess of when the school hits that number, then the residual falls to the general government side, and we have to cut it. And I've had that happen.
On the state website, it says that Chapter 70 is the program of state aid to public elementary and secondary schools. In addition to providing state aid to support school operations, it also establishes minimum spending requirements for each school district and minimum requirements for each municipality's share of school costs. So I don't know how that Chapter 70 could be spent for anything other than schools.
What you're referring to is earmarking. There has been an unsuccessful effort on many occasions to earmark Chapter 70 as exclusive school property. It has failed every time it's been attempted because were it to pass, it would be a train wreck for the general government side. It would be non-sustainable. So every time it's been attempted, it's been defeated by the legislature. What you're reading from is the intent of Chapter 70 aid as expressed through net school spending. The happy circumstance is this. If Chapter 70 aid ends up being 19 million, as I predicted here for sake of discussion, your school budget currently is 25 million. So theoretically, you can have all the Chapter 70 aid because your budget is much bigger than that to begin with. But we don't do it that way because if we were to take the cherry sheet components and say, okay, unrestricted general government aid is exclusively the property of the general government, and Chapter 70 is exclusively the property of the school, then the legislature would give it to us that way, and it would be earmarked. And they have assiduously said no to earmarking. There are exceptions. On the cherry sheet, there are the offsets. Money that comes in directly to the library, it's an offset for them. In is school lunch money, that is an offset for school lunch program, and those are truly earmarked, but there's very few earmarks on the cherry sheet.
Thank you.
All set?
Yes.
Councilor Carrasco?
Yeah, I understand the concern that we have in regards to cuts right now, but again, if we foresee the cuts that are going to happen in 6 years, 7 years, our town is going to be in some serious trouble on all aspects. And my major concern is if we keep raising taxes, we have all these properties right now that are vacant. Nobody wants to move into Southbridge for various reasons. So if we continue to raise taxes, more people are going to leave town. They're going to jump ship, and we're going to continue to have more vacant properties. I understand that we don't want to see the cuts, but if, in my personal budget, if I have to cut television, internet, all these luxuries, then you cut them so you can survive. Southbridge has way too many luxuries. So if it means for us to cut some people, cut some things, unfortunately, reality has to hit us. And I'm glad, Mr. Town Manager, that you said it, because it's never been said that we are living out of our means. It's always been, no, this is how we got to do it. This is the way it is. It's been done this way for 30 years, and we're going to continue to do it that way. Thank you. Thank you for being honest, because in reality, the next group of counselors that's elected, they're going to be looking at a scenario that's much more scarier, because they're going to be in this position for 3 years, and they're going to be looking at deeper deficit, because reality is there's no new businesses. What businesses are coming here? We have sandwich shops. Yeah, thank you. Great food. We do support, but they're not bringing us crazy money. So we need to work on some inner house stuff first before we, and truthfully, we do have some things that we can tweak. Yes, you know, I'm glad that we're doing some programmings with some grants, but if we can change some of the use of our grants and use of some of these things, that we can improve our marketing and improve our town, then I think that would be wise. But raising the taxes, whether it be maximum tax levy or raising it 1%, you're still raising it, and you're still hurting our citizens. You're still hurting the ones that are really, some of them that have been here all their life because they've been part of generations here. And you got to look at the makeup of our community. Our makeup of our community, yes, we have a lot of high-rises, yes, we have a lot of apartments, but they don't get touched with this information. They don't get touched with this. So we have to look beyond the box. And I'm willing to take a hit, be the counselor that nobody likes, be the one that everybody criticizes. I'm okay. But in the long run, we're doing something that's going to save us from 7 years from now, closing the whole police department, closing the whole fire department, closing the whole DPW because we have no money. Because that's what, and things are only getting worse. So I'm not for raising the taxes. I'm for looking at specific line items in our budgets that we can start cutting certain things out of and seeing where we can go. I mean, in the real world, let's get out of municipal government for 1 second. In the real world, nobody gets raises. And we constantly give our municipal employees raises. So we got to, yeah, we got some union stuff that we got to pay our dues to, I guess, as a town, and give them their increases, but it just doesn't happen. It just, I mean, unfortunately, it is a tough pill to swallow tonight, but we got to do the wisest decision moving forward, because if not, if we keep raising taxes and trying to keep the same services, we're just going to create a bigger hole, and we need several shovels to dig ourselves out.
Councilor Clements?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was only going to bring up the elephant in the room on the sheet here, but first, the previous speaker has, I'm sorry, just possessed me to speak what I've been wanting to say now for a number of meetings, that I wish he would stop insulting the community in which I live. I'm not seeing this community from rose-colored glasses, and I've been here a long time too, but it does no good to continually demean this community and the good people who keep opening businesses here. To say that there are no businesses opening besides a sandwich shop is inaccurate. Over the last number of years, I personally have read many names of many businesses who not only have come to this community, who have stayed in this community, have reinvested in this community, from state-of-the-art fiber optics companies who create the most amazing medical devices. If you haven't been to Optum yet on Pleasant Street, maybe you should get a tour. To people who stay and reinvest in our old DPW building and have made it a beautiful, viable workplace for many more employees in the copy industry, from the Wells building on Main Street that is maintained by an absent landlord who lives across the country, who I've met numerous times now, where a restaurant has opened and doing very well if you haven't been there yet, and a dentist. 2 dentists have moved in and service people from young age all the way up to adults. That's just in this past year on the dentist. I just want to say, yeah, we have problems. Every community does, but I am tired of sitting up here and hearing it get insulted with the
No businesses will come here. Everyone is leaving. Gosh, you'd think it was a ghost town out there. Last time I checked, there was a heck of a lot of traffic. And I'm tired of it, and I wish it's on the same level as people insulting each other on council. When you insult the community in which I live and the others live, I think it is very disrespectful, and I please ask you, while you can complain about the concerns you have, stop insinuating that it's all doom and gloom in this community, because it is not. Thank you for that. And now the elephant in the room that I would refer to on this budget is school choice. And we're all up here together tonight. It's really great. And everyone is talking about cuts and cuts and cuts. And one thing we have to know is that $1.2 million is going out of this town every single year. But actually, it was $750,000 6 years ago. And I suggest that, once again, we're trying to improve the school systems. We're trying to have a new generation of people who are living here. And, housing transfers, I do watch those in the Worcester paper every weekend to make sure people are still buying and selling houses here in Southbridge. Anyway, what we need to do is develop the school system, keep working together, enhance that, make that better, so that it is a welcoming community to all who might choose to move here for the wonderful things that we have, like a full-time fire and a full-time police and trash pickup for the next 7 years, and many full-time library, nice hospital with a beautiful cancer center, on, and a college. Did we mention the college at the bottom of the hill? And a beautiful hotel and conference center. I don't think I need to go on. You get the point. But let's work to getting the $680,000 in unemployment down and the 1.2 from that's almost $2 million right there. How about we work together, make the school a better place, and make our community more inviting for all? That's all.
Councilor
I'm
Vecchia.
done with this meeting.
This question is to Mr. Chairman. I have this pledge that was signed by 5 people, and we said we're going to cut taxes. We're going to cut the budget 1%. So could we vote on this, or should I save this for another day? What should I do with this? We have 5 people who signed this that we wanted to cut the budget 1%. We have 5 out of them. We have a majority. So I don't know, we don't want to raise taxes, so could we leave it with him to try and decrease the budget $500,000 from last year? Because that's what this pledge says.
So I'm trying to make sure I understand exactly what you're asking for. Is for council to take action to ratify the proposed pledge?
Well, to take action that we want to reduce last year's budget by 1%, because that's what this pledge says. It says, it states by at least every budget, but I think it'd be good enough if we just said to reduce last year's budget by 1%. So he would have something to go on. We have 5 signatures.
So on our agenda is vote by council to establish budget parameters.
Okay, that's fine.
So
That's fine.
if somebody was to make a motion for a budget parameter, they could do so.
Okay, I'll make it. A budget parameter of reducing last year's budget by 1%, the total budget.
I'll second.
Who
So
seconds
there's
it?
a motion and a second to reduce
Last year's budget by 1%, meaning the budget would be reduced by $497,776.
So I think just as a friendly amendment, I don't think you would want to say reducing last year's budget, because that's,
Okay, whatever you want. Whatever you would like to say it. How do
because
you
that
want-
would be fiscal 15, which is kind of late in the game to try and change that. So my assumption is then your motion would be to reduce the fiscal 16 budget, as a budget parameter, to reduce the fiscal 16 budget by 1% of the fiscal 15 budget.
That's right, that's excellent.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on,
Question, since I'll have to do this. So does that mean that we're going to take the $50,862,704 projected spending and reduce it by 500?
No, the year before's budget, that's your
That's
budget
not
for
what it
this
says.
year. We want to reduce to $49,777,000 by $500,000. the FY 2015 budget.
So that, if I'm
With no
understanding...
tax
So you want
increase,
to
should be
take the current year's budget, the fiscal 15 budget, of $49,770,756, reduce it by
1%.
$497,000.
That's right.
And that resulting number is what the fiscal 16 budget has to balance to.
That's right.
Okay. I understand the motion.
Counselor Steves.
I'd actually like to see a couple of different things. I'd like to see that so we can see what it actually would look like. Okay, I'd like to see something where we have the same budget for next year, for the coming fiscal year, that we currently have for this year.
Well, I can give you a quick snapshot. What that means is you take that $50,862,000 number and you reduce it to $50,362,000.
No, I mean, no, what I mean is that the current, the fiscal 2015 budget that you listed here in the paperwork is $49,777,000, okay? What would that budget, if we had that as our budget for fiscal 2016, what would that mean to Southbridge? On top of, what would that mean for Southbridge? Basically a complete level funding, A, what his proposal would mean, and what your proposal,
So
that you've already, the numbers that you were already giving us, what that actually
Sure.
means.
What you'd be doing is you'd be taking the current year's budget,
Yes.
cutting that $500,000, and then that amount would be the budget on July 1st of 2015 to June 30th of next year.
I get that. No,
So,
what I'm asking is to see, if
so
we can have
here's what it means,
a couple
roughly.
of comparisons so that we can
Okay.
see, what would Councilor Vecchia's proposal actually do to the services in Southbridge? What would a level-funded budget do to the service in Southbridge? And what would the numbers that you are proposing, the $50,000,007,
Well, here, I'm going
do
to
for
give,
the
I'm going to give
service
that
in
to you.
Southbridge?
So it's a $49,200,000 budget, roughly, is what you'd have for 16, okay? $49,200,000. Right now, you got $50,862,000, so that has to get cut $1 million. So take this expenditure level projected, cut it $1 million, and that's where you are. So in other words, because they're on the expense side, there are very few things you can cut. You can't cut the insurances anymore, they're level. You can't cut the cherry sheet aid, you can't cut the snow and ice, I mean, they're all bare bones now. So what it means is that we'd have to take, and, I'm going to go out there and say, what I've been told the way it works is the school would take its pro rata share, which is about 2/3 of that number, and we'd take about 1/3. That's, take the ratio between 25 million and 12 million, and that sounds about 2/3, 1/3, roughly. So the school would cut the $25.7 million budget by about $700,000. We would take the $12.7 million budget and cut it by about $300,000. And that would accomplish that goal. And I will tell you that I think I've illustrated 4 positions that are worth about $250,000. So I would eliminate those 4 positions. And I'd still have to find, on the general government side, I'd have to find another $50,000 to $75,000, somewhere in that range. So there'd be a few other cuts as well, I'm sure. I don't know what yet. I'd have to go look at it. And I can't speak to the school side. The superintendent probably can, but that's a $600,000 or $700,000 cut in a budget that was increased by 2% to start with. So the 2% is worth $504,000. They'd be cutting a little more than that. So the 2% increase would be gone, and they'd have to get down below that. That's a pretty daunting challenge, I'm sure. I sort of, because I had the advantage of talking to some of the counselors, one-on-one over the course of the last 4 or 5 weeks, had a bit of an advantage that I don't think the superintendent has coming in here tonight, and that is thinking in terms of if I got a message tonight, which was cut $500,000, where would I do it? We've already had some conversations. So first place I'd go is those 4 positions, because there's no unemployment implication. So I don't have to cut another person to fund that. So those 4 would be gone, and then we'd have to look at a couple more. That gives you a rough.
Okay, and also I was wondering...
By the way, I wouldn't describe that as a disaster for the community. I mean, it's full positions out of a couple of hundred.
Yeah, I get that.
So I would say it's a serious cut. It will reduce some services in some selected areas, but it's certainly a manageable cut. I'm not going to say it isn't. I'm far less concerned, frankly, in the budget, and a lot more concerned, and was hoping the council might give me some information about revenue. Because let's say, for instance, I cut $1 million out of expenses. I could cut $1 million out of landfill reimbursements and leave taxes at 871, 5% increase. I don't know yet. I've heard a couple of councilors speak, but I haven't heard everybody speak. In other words, the message you want to give me, I think, should be, what do you want to see to have happen to taxes? See, budgets in the world of Prop 2.5 are what's called revenue-driven. It's not expense-driven. You're attacking the expenses, not the way to do it. Tell me what you don't want to have happen on the revenue side, i.e., we don't want a tax increase, or we only want a 1%, whatever it is that you want to say. And then, no, you just want to pass a motion that says cut the operating budget 1%. That's the tail before the horse. What you really need to want to say, I think, is we don't want to have a tax increase. And if you say that, then I know that $871,000 is not going to get raised. Now, let me figure out with my department heads in the school department how to do that for you. Let me go figure it out. I think it's unwise for the council to dictate spending terms when you're not familiar with the intricacies of all that spending, and that may not necessarily be what you want. Because I think what you want is you want to get at taxes. So say so. Say what you want to say about taxes, not about the spending, because that's approaching the question backwards. I know where you're trying to get, but you're putting me in a little bitty box is what you're doing. You're saying to me, Kev, we want $1 million out of this budget. We want $1 million less spending. And the only way we're going to let you do it is by looking at the operating budgets of the school and the town. That's it. You can't look at all these other lines, millions and millions of dollars. I can't look at any of them because you just put me in a little box. Now, if you put me in a little box, I'll give you the cuts you want. I can tell you right now, you're not going to like them because there's going to be layoffs. There's no getting around it. But if you tell me don't make a tax increase, then we got something to work with there. And it's about the same, by the way.
Okay. I'm just trying to figure out to see where things would stand on these various options. I'm not committed to anything at the moment. But one of the things I noticed going through the last expense control report that Karen gave us, there's an awful lot of items in here that have virtually not been used.
Not been what?
There's an awful lot of line items in here that have been virtually not used, despite the fact that we're well over halfway through the fiscal year. So that makes me wonder, what are some of these here actually here for, and why do we have them in the budget if we're not using them?
I can't answer the question. There's thousands of lines there.
No, there's a lot.
I don't know which ones you mean.
That have zeros expended so far.
Yeah, there are some that.
One particular one. There's dozens of them. But
yeah, there are some this time of year. There's some of it's seasonal spending. Some is departments haven't ordered their supplies yet. There's a lot of reasons why you see that. You really have to look at the year-end expenditure patterns in order to, when you're analyzing a budget, you can't look mid-season because there's so many things that cause things to be spent overly or under as of a certain time. So you look at the June 30 totals and now you start to get some ideas. So as I'm going through the department budgets, one thing I'm doing is I'm looking at the prior 2 fiscal years line by line. And I'm saying, okay, so the last 2 years you spent 75% of what you're asking for. Why are you asking for so much? Sometimes it's a good reason, sometimes there isn't. Sometimes, what the heck happened there? Other times it's, here's why, and it's a darn good reason. My advice to the council, and I've always given this advice to my councils, is don't get wrapped up in the nano details because you'll drive yourselves to distraction. And if you think 9 of you can go through a budget and get consensus on thousands of lines, good luck.
Not possible.
Not going to happen. You will make yourselves nuts. And you'll be here, basically, get cots, because you're going to need it. We're going to be sleeping here. You're way better served as a council to say something like a policy body, which is, we don't want a tax increase, or we don't want more than a 1% tax increase, or whatever it is you want to say it. But please don't put it in the form of, Kev, do this to the budget, because it may well be possible to accomplish your goal, not have a tax increase, and still be able to do some modest things in the budget that the town needs. I'm not saying it is. I'm just saying, give me a little flexibility. And give the superintendent a little flexibility. You know, that's what you're paying us for.
What's that, Councilor Steves? Yeah. Councilor Vecchia.
To begin with, I said I'd like to cut the budget 1%. Has nothing to do with revenues, it's just expenses. I've been in this business myself for 40 years, okay? I know what I'm talking about. Secondly, we have a motion, but the point is, we don't want to raise taxes. That's the main goal. No tax increase, okay? I don't care how you cut it. So that's why I asked the chairman, how do you want to proceed? We have a motion on the floor to cut the budget 1%, last year's budget, okay? If you want to proceed with that, or you want to just tell him that we don't want to raise taxes, that's fine. I don't mind bending here. I just want the chairman to tell us, we have a motion, okay? And what's the best way to handle this?
My suggestion, Apple, is for the council to say very clearly, do not increase taxes the $871,000 that is possible, period, done. And then there's no tax increase, that's it.
But you understand where I'm coming from when I said the expenses. I'm not even looking at the revenues. I'm just saying, we run a house, okay, and we usually spend $1 million. And I'm saying we're only going to spend 1% less, okay, this year, all right? That's all I'm saying. So when you make things about you can't touch the revenues, I'm assuming the revenues are going to be the same. They might be higher, they might be lower. But if they're lower, we don't want to raise taxes at all.
And the reason I'm suggesting that you substitute the don't raise taxes is because that says, I get it, you don't want to raise taxes. Okay, if that passes, we got it, that's it, that's the marching call. But inside of the expenses, I've got a lot of lines here, and a lot of money, and a lot of flexibility.
Okay.
And if you let me have that flexibility, I might be able to accomplish your goal and not have the harmful reductions that might otherwise be required if you simply cut the budget, if that's what you're telling me, because once you cut the budget, I get no flexibility anymore.
There's always bending room here, so can I change the motion that we're not going to raise taxes?
It is your motion, so you can amend it.
I amend it to state that we, under no circumstances are we going to raise taxes this year. That when December comes, there's not going to be no tax increase to the people that pay the real estate taxes, to the homeowners.
Okay.
One question, you have $222,000 of debt exclusion for Bay Path, which the voters voted.
Right.
That is a tax increase of $222,000. That is the law, you must raise it. You have no power to cut that. The voters voted it at the ballot box. The $208,000 above it is new growth attributable to new taxpayers. That's money that they will be paying because they built buildings. I don't know where they are, Will can tell us, but that's new buildings. So that 208 to 222 is money that has to be raised. It's not a choice. The 871, 846 is a discretionary matter. You don't want to raise it, we don't raise it. So I'd like you to be this, that specific.
Okay, but the Bay Path and the new growth, that isn't going to raise the taxes of the people in Southbridge.
Yes, that will raise taxes because voters said.
Well, we don't want to raise taxes.
What the voters said, they want to raise the 222. They voted it.
Okay, but so what you're going to do, you still don't want to raise taxes.
So you want me to cut another $222,000 out of taxes despite the fact that the voters levied that on themselves?
We don't want the taxpayers, okay? The point is, we don't want the taxpayers to have no tax increases, okay?
Well, that's up to you.
That's my motion.
Right, that's up
No
to you.
tax increases. Whatever you have to do to accomplish that.
Yes.
Ms. Donovan?
Yes, thank you. Through you to Mr. Pecos. When you were talking about free cash, you mentioned that one of the proper uses for free cash is for capital expenditures. And I was just curious, has anybody done any type of capital needs analysis to know if there was a separate capital budget, what types of improvements are needed in our town? Obviously, this is not going to happen, but I'm just curious to say, you mentioned about kicking the can, so where are we as far as capital improvements are concerned?
Since there weren't even capital budget instructions issued last year, so there was no invitation made to submit the request.
Okay.
Ordinarily, and I will be doing it, a memo goes out to all departments, school included, and it says, what are your capital needs for the next six years? Many you lay them out on a spreadsheet, and what do you need for the coming year? So that's large-scale building maintenance, boiler repairs. I know you've got a boiler in a school that's gone and it has to get replaced. It's roof repairs, it's capital trucks down at the DPW, it's all that kind of stuff. So I don't think we have an old one, but I think it's out of date. So we've got to get that updated, and I'll be doing that this year. Frankly,
So that would again be above and beyond this
we're going to go through the
presentation,
exercise,
yeah.
and I'm going to put it together for you.
Sure.
There's not going to be any money to fund
Right,
it.
right.
So I'm going to do it, and I'm going to hand it to you, and at least my predecessor will have a starting point to be able to say, okay, we have these capital needs we need to do.
Right.
And you might decide, the council might decide at a later date, well, okay, we're not going to raise taxes to pay for operating, but we may need to raise taxes to pay for some capital. I don't know. You might, once you see it.
Right.
It's up to you guys.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councilor Clements?
Thanks. I'm a little bit confused because you keep saying that we didn't have any capital funds. But I sat in an awful lot of meetings in regard to capital improvements for the water and sewer treatment plants. See, that's the enterprise, so that's as long as it's capital from that. Right. So, and I guess I'm still confused. We've bought vehicles, we've had other budget items in departments.
I was told that you did not issue capital budget instructions last year, and nobody assembled a capital budget. And if there is one, I don't know.
But in the past, we've gone over this stuff since I've been here. So last year, we didn't buy stuff, but we've had...
I can't comment on anything except last year.
Right. We've never, but we have. I know we have. We've talked about it.
Oh, in the past years, I'm sure you have.
Yeah. And I guess with the enterprise fund, it makes sense. It's all coming out of the enterprise fund on that end of things, but, okay.
I just have one quick question, and it's actually for Mr. Knoyer. I've got the ballpark figure in my head, but tax rate is, as best you can recall, since it's kind of your business, is what currently?
The tax rate for this year is $20.36 per thousand. Next year will be completely unrelated to that, even if we had an identical tax levy, because the tax rate, half of the calculation is the total of all of the real estate values, and we're in a revaluation year, so the values will change. So that's why I say tax rate one year to the next is meaningless. It's what, the net effect is to people.
So if I understand correctly, then essentially a vote to set as a budget parameter based on tax rate is really kind of an exercise in futility.
Yes, and the reason is, as we've said before, is every property in town goes up and down relative to other properties. So if you didn't raise a single penny in tax levy, new tax dollars next year, Apple's bill might still go up and yours might go down because his property might go up in value. Now, it doesn't mean that we're bringing in more tax dollars overall. It just means the slice of the pie has shifted. As Will will tell you, the slice of the pie is going to shift every single year, without a doubt, because some neighborhoods go up, some neighborhoods go down. That's the way it is. Some types of people like one kind of a house, and now they don't. They want a different kind. So there's more demand, so the assessed value of that goes up, they get a big piece of the pie. That's why I want your instruction to me to be very precise, so that here's what I don't want to have happen. You pass a motion, says no tax increase. The law requires us to levy this $222,708 of new taxes. The voters directed it at the ballot box. This council has no power to change that. So, You're sitting here in January. I'm not going to be here. The tax bills are going to go out, and Apple's going to scream bloody murder, because tax bill's going to go up a little bit. Maybe his goes up. Maybe Esteban's goes up. Maybe Denise's goes up. Somebody's is going up, I can promise you that. And somebody's is going down, because that's what happens every year. And somebody's got to pay that $222,000 because the voters ordered it. And so Apple's going to say, I said taxes should go up, and somebody's taxes are going up. And we're going to be sitting here having the same conversation. So it's very important that everybody understands what is it you're saying. And so I can't say this enough. I'm going to say it again. And I don't mean to be unwelcome or strident here, but it's the 871, 846, the new taxes that Prop 2.5 allows us to levy that you're talking about not levying. It's not the 222 Bay Path debt exclusion, which the voters have said you shall levy it, and it's not the 208 new growth taxes, which is from new business in town. I mean, my goodness, if we don't raise taxes because we bring in new business, then we are truly lost, because you are down a downward spiral, because if you can't raise taxes because of new construction, then you're going to just keep driving your budget down every year, and that's headed for a train wreck itself. So those $430,708 should be raised, and that will result in an increase, but it will be a tiny increase. I don't know what it is. Will can compute it, but it's tiny.
My guess is the new growth is on new taxpayers, so that $200,000, 208 we estimate, is really a net effect of zero to existing taxpayers, because it's new taxpayers coming in. And the other 220,000, I think, a little over 1%, I would imagine, a little, percent and a quarter.
So I'll just say it again. If you vote not to raise taxes, we don't know what that means. If you vote not to levy 871,846 in new taxes, we know exactly what that means. We know what that means.
So then your suggestion, based upon the feedback, is that the motion really should be stated something to the effect of not to raise the levy amount.
Exactly. So if you were to say, do not raise 871,846, then there will be no tax increase attributable to what Prop 2.5 lets us do. If you say, don't raise it more than 200,000, with that 871 becomes 200. If you say, don't raise it 500, then the 871 becomes 371. Whatever it is you say, attach it to the 871, and we know what you're saying.
I'm all set. Ms. Donovan?
Thank you. Mr. Canoyer, I have a question. I should know the answer to this, but I'm not sure, so I just wanted to clarify.
Sure.
When Mr. Pecos was just saying that Proposition 2.5, what it allows is us to raise was a levy of $871,846. That's not our levy limit. Is that correct?
No, that's in additional taxes. Our levy limit is $19,345,000, or our projected levy limit. That's what Proposition 2.5 would allow the town to raise. Most towns do raise to their levy limit, not all, but that's what the town would allow us, the
So what's
state.
that number again, 19 what?
$19,345,839, approximately.
Remember, we have a worksheet. It's in here. And all it does is it takes the prior year's tax levy, adds last year's new growth, which was $234,121, computes that number, and then multiplies it by 2.5.
Right.
And that number is $18,915,131. That's where it comes from.
Okay.
So, now, there was one other component to it, and that was, last year you did not raise the full levy limit. And that, how much was left on the table? 700?
I think it was $176,000 we raised below last year's levy limit.
Okay. So when we do the worksheet, we don't take that out that wasn't raised. It's in.
Yeah, that's lost. I understand
So
that. Because that's our
what you've
excess
got
levy
here-
capacity that we have every year.
Right. So what you got here is your take at that $18,915,131 number is raising the taxes you didn't raise last year that you could have.
Right.
It's raising the growth. And it's taking last year's total levy multiplied by 2.5, and those three components become 19 million.
Okay.
That's what that number is.
Thank you very much.
And those three combined is 871, 846. That's what that
Gotcha.
is.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Canoia.
Mr. Chairman?
Sure.
Could I just finish on one comment that when you called me up, I wasn't going to say this, but I really want to. I'm a resident of Southbridge, been here my whole life. This is a comment as a resident, nothing to do with being on the Board of Assessors for all the years and all of that things. I really believe taxes are not the issue. I mean, I'd love my taxes to go down. We all would. My taxes are about 50% more than the average single-family house. I wish they would I wish they would go down every year. But taxes are not the issue. There are many, many other complicated issues. Something that we should not lose sight of is one of the councils made reference to the loss of the middle class. And that's true. Where did that begin? Well, it's been going on for about 15 years, 20 years. But it got a turbocharge around 2006. And what happened then? There we had similar discussions to we're having now about all kinds of cuts. There were all kinds of potential cuts to our school system and to the town. And that made a lot of homeowners and people who think about their children, education, and the quality of life, that made them take note. And some started utilizing school choice. That's when it accelerated. Some decided to move out of town, private schools, all kinds of things. So I just don't want, as a resident, I'm not speaking as an assessor here, let's not lose focus on its quality of life. We have issues we need to fix. Councilor Clements mentioned $2 million, a place where $2 million is, if we were to fix those issues, school choice and the unemployment and all of that, that's a big part of the problem of the landfill. But I just, as a resident, not as an assessor, let's not lose focus of why people are here. And, I mean, look at the storm we're having out there right now for the last few weeks. We're dealing with it in a tremendous way. What would happen if only one lane was open on all these roads? And I'm not trying to talk scare tactics. I'm simply trying to talk quality of life. This is my hometown, my town. I stay here. I'm going to stay here. I love it here. That's what I'm looking for. Our taxes, I hate to see them go up. They do go up. But on a reasonable comparative measure to any other town, they are not excessive. Again, only as a resident. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Vecchio.
So the motion is going to say that we're not going to touch, what is the motion going to say? $871,840?
I believe the manager's recommendation is to not raise the levy, the tax levy, or the amount levied in fiscal 15.
Yes,
something to that effect.
Just for the record, that is not the manager's recommendation. That is the manager trying to make clarification that the staff can understand.
Okay,
Noted.
so what is the motion going to be?
So I believe then what is being suggested is that the, unless you want to use the specific number,
$871,846.
If that's what you wish to accomplish, to not raise taxes due to what Prop 2.5 allows,
Right.
then the motion would be to not raise tax, to not
increase the levy.
increase the tax levy by $871,846.
Okay, to not increase the tax levy by $871,846. Okay?
Is that your motion then?
Yeah, that's my motion.
Is that still the motion you're seconding?
Okay.
Any further discussion on that motion, Ms. Quinney?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just, to build on what Mr. Canoyer said, we have a school district that is level 4 and in crisis, and we have a set budget, obviously, within which to work. We have $1.2 million going for school choice. We already have committed a certain amount to BayPath that will have an increase that we have no control over and will be obligated to pay. So we're giving BayPath a 2% increase in addition to their capital that our town has agreed to. We have a level 4 school district. We're trying to get out of level 4. We've stated many times our community will not be a vibrant community in which people are knocking down the doors to move into unless our schools are successful. I'm not asking to open the floodgates for finances to the school district. However, I think continuing to cut in places that are going to impact not only our students but our community as a whole is painful, and to hear that the school district is going to bear 2/3 of that burden when we don't know what our net school spending number will be, and a multitude of things that will impact that number and students in classes and our community as a whole, I think is a gross disservice to our community in its entirety. And I think we do have a great town, and there are a lot of positive things that are happening in this town and in our school districts, in our school district. And moving forward, I don't know, as a member of the negotiations subcommittee and IBB and all this, how in good faith we can sit across from people who have worked and committed their lives to the school district and improving the lives of students and their education and say, well, say goodbye to $600,000 of our teachers, because that's what's important to us at this time. So I just wanted to say that, and this meeting has gone cyclical for a really long time, and thank you, I'm done.
Sure.
Thank you. I'm glad Mrs. Quinney brought that up, because I was thinking of the same thing. She's working very hard to negotiate agreements with our bargaining units. I think we have 5 up for negotiation this year. How do you bargain in good faith when we're looking at cuts? When this district, my children entered the school district the year it was declared underperforming, the year that 55 teachers got laid off, that opened the floodgates to school choice. Yes, it's grown exponentially over the years, that's true. I think if you look in any community, school choice numbers have gone up, they haven't gone down. Some of the communities that are receiving the school choice dollars from us, actually they have the same number of children choicing out of their district. Quabog just tipped the scales where they have, it was in the newspaper, they have 3 more students that choiced in than choiced out for the first time. So school choice is just an abomination in general. It's obviously a failed experiment. And I want to know how, if Massachusetts has received a No Child Left Behind waiver, that the state of Massachusetts is still allowing school choice to continue. It is institutionalized segregation, and I believe that somebody needs to file a class action lawsuit to have this seriously looked at. It is harming our community greatly, and others similarly situated. So those are just my thoughts for tonight. I have many more, but for time's sake, I will leave it there.
Ms. Congdon?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to say to the town council at this time that if the school district succeeds, this town succeeds. And more people, if the school district is doing well, want to stay in this town, and more people want to move to this town. When we go to our conferences, they say that real estate agents promote the schools. They take people that are looking at properties on tours of the schools. When people come into this town, some of the real estate agents say, you know what, just so you know, there's a school choice option, and you think of that when you're buying your property, that Southbridge really is a level 4 school district. And to just go into our budget talks saying, okay, we're going to cut two-thirds of our budget, just does not make sense to me, and is not a good idea for this town when our schools are struggling. Thank you.
Councilor Vecchia?
I don't know where, to the town manager, I don't know where she thinks it's going to cut 2/3. They're going to get the same amount of money as they got last year, $25,232,000. Isn't that correct? On this budget, because the budget's going to stay the same. And the school committee had stated to me earlier, and I think it was you, Lauren, that you really didn't need any extra money this year. So you're going to get what you got last year. So I don't know who's brought this 2/3 into this. It's not no 2/3. You get the same as you got last year.
If you want to, you can, but otherwise.
Yeah. I think that this town, what I said to you was that I think that the town in generally has been fair with the school budget. That's what I said. And generally, I think that's been the case, and I want to ensure that that continues to be the case.
Councilor Carrasco?
Looking at this number, the 871, 846, without touching the school, because that would be my intention. I mean, the presentation that we received up top, department heads can laugh, but you're talking about personnel, $182,000 that can be saved. And then a 2.5 general government wage increase that can be saved. You're talking about $400,000 that can be cut right off the top. So, I mean, I feel that there's places within that can be touched where the school can stay where they are.
Ms. Quinney?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To a previous speaker, you can say that the budget is going to stay the same. The reality is there are step increases, and every time someone moves up a step, that's an increased cost. There are also obligations regarding contracts and increases in that way. So if we are obligated by law to give those step increases, which is a cost that exceeds what the cost was last year, you add to that contractual percentage increases. Overall, if you kept the budget exactly the same, there would have to be significant cuts. And in those cuts would be layoffs, because there's only so much outside. The bulk of the cost of the school district is people. That is where that will come. So then we're going to lay off people, and in laying off people to meet those legal obligations, we're going to increase our unemployment costs, which will then lead to increasing that layoff number greater in order to accommodate the current budget that we have. So it compounds itself, kind of like interest, in having to make cuts with a set number. A current budget that we have doesn't sustain everything that we have. It would be fiscally impossible to do so legally. So I just wanted to make that clarification. Thank you.
Councilor Clements.
We started this conversation with the $500,000 reduction. I was good with that. I'm still good with that. I think $500,000 was a challenge. It's $100,000 off the 2.5 increase because the unions get their increase regardless. So there was about $100,000 in that. There was another 236 on the unfunded for people. I'm good with $500,000 off the budget. I think that's good. But it may raise that $20.36. It may not. But I'm good with cutting the budget, which is the intention I thought we were going for. But just letting you know how I feel.
Just,
871's a lot of money.
I'll just chime in briefly. At the moment, just looking over this, for me, this is, I know we've talked a little bit about seeing the school department in particular get hit and hit hard. For me, my thought process is not so much fiscal 16 as it is fiscal 16, 17, 18 through 23, et cetera. So my concern is, I remember very well, because I was here every night covering the rallies down on the Common, et cetera, when we had the Prop 2.5 override, which did not pass, and we ended up losing 55 teachers, which is just, as one student who came to speak before a council meeting or school committee, I forget which, equated it to cutting off each of his arms. It's the idea that education is great if you can afford it came out of that whole time period. And certainly that's, I think anybody knows me and so forth knows that's hardly my belief process. There's nothing more important and nothing more valuable than a solid education. So my concern ends up being what I've already brought up previously, is the budgetary issues of closing that $2 million gap over 7 years, give or take, so that we don't end up with another Prop 2.5 override that needs to be passed, so that we're not laying off, say, 55 teachers. We're not laying off half the police and fire departments. We're not laying off half the DPW. We're not closing town hall to be open 3 days a week. We're not making this town look like the town of Holland. No offense to Holland. I used to live there briefly. Glad I'm not there, though. So with that, I'm going to support establishing these budget parameters. Certainly that does not mean that this levy limit is set in stone, or not the levy limit, but the levy raised is set in stone. This is something that the manager at this point, with the department heads, will go forward, do their work, and try to come up with a budget that is equitable. There may be tinkering one way or the other, but for me, it becomes an issue of, I would hate to see us finally get out of level 4, and then 2 to 3 years later, have to start all over again because we had to cut off another 55 teachers. That would become the biggest kick to the gut that I could imagine, personally. So with that,
Can we move the question?
you can make that as a motion, yeah?
Make a motion to move the question?
Okay. Do we have a second? Just to move the question.
Move the question.
Okay, so what's the motion, though, that needs to be? What was the final motion?
Do you have the final motion, Mr. Gullickson?
The motion, as I understand it right now, is the vote to not raise the tax levy limit by $871,846 for FY16.
I believe it wouldn't be limit, though. It would be the levy
Yes.
appropriation.
Yeah, just say not to raise the tax levy, not the limit, the tax levy by 871. That's the correct
So the only
motion.
part you do is strike out limit.
Right, just strike the word limit.
Strike the word levy?
No, the word limit.
Limit.
Thank you.
Okay. So that's your motion, Councilor Vecchia?
Yes.
Okay, so we have the motion to move the question. Do we have a second on that? Which is non-debatable, so at this point, a roll call to move the question.
Roll call to move the question?
Yep. Briefly, though, before you do, Mr. Manager, because we haven't gone through, it's not often we have to go through Robert's rules for these sorts of situations. Would this be something that the entire body, both school and town, would be voting for?
No.
Okay, just the town council side,
Council
correct?
is the only body authorized to
It's
set
not
a
debatable
criminal like
when you want
this.
to move the question.
Right, no, I just wanted to make sure that we weren't excluding the school side.
You're not on the council.
I'm aware, but
No,
being
I
a
know.
joint meeting, just trying to make sure we're covering our bases. Go ahead.
Vote to move the question. Counselor Steves?
Yeah.
Counselor Vandal?
Yes.
Counselor Vecchia?
Yes.
Counselor Carrasco?
Yes.
Counselor Clements?
Yes.
Counselor Estrada?
Yes.
Counselor Moriarty?
No.
Counselor Peliquin? 6 yes, 2 no.
All right, so the vote on the motion, please.
Counselor Vandal?
Yes.
Counselor Vecchia?
Yes.
Counselor Carrasco?
Yes.
Counselor Clements?
No.
Counselor Estrada?
Yes.
Counselor Moriarty?
Yes.
Counselor Peliquin?
No.
Counselor Steves?
No.
5 yes, 3 no.
Okay, motion carries. Agenda item number 6 says vote to adjourn. All in favor, hand raise is fine. Unanimous, thank you. We are adjourned.